Here, Question Period Canada, how y'all doing? I'm pretty excited because today we have some exciting stuff to show. This just happened. It's about an hour old. I did get to watch a couple of pieces of it, and it's really frigging interesting, guys. It's very exciting couple of hours we've got lined up here. This is Brock, it's Barrett, it's our enemies, Khalid, Shanahan. It's a lot of fun what we're going to be watching here the next couple of hours, I assure you. Good afternoon, everybody. As soon as we start the program, I'll get into saying hello to everybody. I can already see there's a great crowd already gathered in the lobby. If we can get some likes going, that'll help out the next couple of hours. But we do have some very exciting content for us to watch and learn. The Liberals are running scared. I saw enough of it to know that. And this is, again, I don't mean to sell it. This is some frigging exciting Canadian federal politics. So let's jump right in, get this thing going.
This meeting to order, and welcome to meeting 111. Mr. Mr. Chair, if I may. Yes, Ms. Shanahan. Yes, on a point of order, please, if I may, Mr. Chair. Yes, please do go ahead. It's with great regret that I have to make this point of order, but it has to do with the
great regret
procedure that our committee and meetings generally follow, that is meetings during constituency weeks, time that we should be spending with our constituents. Now, we did receive a work plan, but this morning at 8:43 a.m. precisely, 4 meetings that will be taking place this week. Now, under normal conditions, members would be in their ridings and working with and for their constituents. So, Mr. Chairperson, this is not normal practice. Normally, we're consulted. Normally, there are no meetings that are held unilaterally and organised in that manner by the chair of the committee. And it's my fond hope that in the future, well, we do have our work plan now, and that there will be no future surprise meetings out of the blue like those this week. Good. Well, that was more of a political statement you just made.
I did the courtesy of having the clerk instruct everyone about these meetings. Plus, the work plan, of course, came today. But before that, there was notice of the meeting that came out both the end of last week.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Khalid, I'm addressing a point of order right now, so why don't you just hold on a second, and I'll finish up with Ms. Shanahan, and then hear your
everybody,
point
this
of order.
Is so exciting.
I will, Ms. Khalid, ask you to, when I turn to you, it will be a point of order. I'm going to address this
Bud Wilson,
just once,
day,
and then we can deal with it
I don't
later
mean to interrupt.
But Ms. Shanahan, there was the work plan,
Terry,
of course, is not
a
notice. We had a subcommittee meeting on this. Your representative on that subcommittee, of course, was welcome to brief you on what was discussed. And I've sent Ms. Yip a note today if we can talk about it tomorrow or wait till next week. The preference is to wait until next week. Ms. Khalid, you have a point of order, please.
Yes, Chair. I take objection to you calling Ms. Brenda's concerns to be political in nature. I think that we have worked very well in this committee in the past in bringing consensus, in working through the issues. We are a nonpartisan or a multi-partisan committee, and for you to make those objections, Chair, it's...
Thank you. Ms. Khalid, all committees are...
No, sorry, Chair, I'm not done.
This is not a point of order, Ms. Khalid. Ms. Khalid, this is again a statement. All committees are multi-partisan. This is one that is also opposition-led. We had a subcommittee meeting on this, and I gave everyone what I thought to be suitable notice and received no objections beforehand. I am now on the floor, which is disrupting the meeting. This is not a point of order, and so I'm going to move on. You'll be in a position to make a further statement when it is your time. But again, my email works when I'm not in committee as well, and members are, of course, welcome to either work through me or work through their representative on the subcommittee. But the idea, to Ms. Shanahan's point, that today's working calendar represents the first that anyone heard of this is false. There was both an unofficial notice that was given a week ago, as well as official notification the end of last week, and then yesterday as well.
Point of order, Chair. My intervention was more that I hope that we will now follow the work plan and the subcommittee discussions, and that we will have no more meetings that are unilaterally called by the chair.
Well, Chair, if we're just offering points of order, Chair, I'd like to make a point of order that I hope that we don't have points of order that aren't actually points of order like those from the previous two
Barrett.
interveners.
I was taking Ms. Shanahan's last comment as a bow on her previous comment, and we will now.
The whole thing will be fire
continue
like
the
this. It's
opening
gonna be
process,
nuts.
welcoming our witnesses, and then
Very
we'll get
exciting
to
day
and then
in
we'll get
Parliament.
to
Hey, Two Flips, what's up? Hello,
the
Calamaru,
rounds of
LOL.
questioning. And just for the record,
Lightning
everyone,
Rod,
the indication
Tyrone,
I have
what
is
is
that
up?
we will
Bob Boom, what up?
review the subcommittee work.
There's so much going on. I'm just talking
Tuesday
over them, and I
at
don't want to
the
do that.
End of the
I'm
meeting
gonna
is the preference
just
from members.
We'll watch theirs.
So, without further ado, today's meeting is taking place in hybrid format. Pursuant to the standing orders, members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. A reminder that all comments should be addressed to the chair. Contrairement à l'article 108.3G du règlement, le comité
Pursuant to Standing Order 1083G, the committee shall resume its study of ArriveCan Report 1.
from the Office of the Auditor General, Andrew Hayes, Deputy Auditor General, Sami Hanoush, Principal, Lucie Després, Director, and from the Canadian Border Services Agency, Darryl Vleeming, Vice President and Chief Information Officer, and Jonathan Moore, Vice President, Controllership Branch. Mr. Hayes, you'll be given up to 5 minutes for your opening remarks, and then we'll turn to CBSA. So without further ado, you have the floor, Mr. Hayes. Do you have a timer by chance?
Mr. Chair, thank you for inviting us again to discuss our report on ArriveCan. I would like to acknowledge that this hearing is taking place on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. I am accompanied by Sami Hanoush and Lucie Després, who were responsible for the audit. Dans le cadre de notre audit de l'application ArriveCan,
Our audit of the ArriveCan application looked at how the Canada Border Services Agency, the Public Health Agency of Canada, and Public Services and Procurement Canada managed the procurement and development of the application, and whether they spent public funds in a way that delivered value for money.
you have heard the Auditor General emphasize how deeply concerned we are by what this audit didn't find. We didn't find records to accurately show how much was spent on what, who did the work, or how and why contracting decisions were made. And that paper trail should have existed. Overall, this audit shows a glaring disregard for basic management and contracting practices throughout ArriveCan's development and implementation. Government organizations needed to be flexible and fast in responding to the COVID-19 pandemic, but they still needed to document their decisions and demonstrate the prudent use of public funds. In this audit, we found disappointing failures and omissions everywhere we looked. Public servants must always be transparent and accountable to Canadians for their use of public funds. An emergency does not mean that all the rules go out the window and that departments and agencies are no longer required to document their decisions and keep complete and accurate records. Monsieur le Président, je termine ainsi.
Mr. Chairperson, we'd be pleased to answer any questions, and I conclude my opening remarks. Thank you very much.
Mr. Moore, I understand you have an opening statement. 5 minutes, please.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and honourable members of the committee. I'd like to thank the Auditor General and the Procurement Ombud for their reports, which have identified some important lessons for us all. The Canada Border Services Agency has already implemented a number of actions to address their recommendations. At the onset of the pandemic, the CBSA was focused on protecting our borders while maintaining the flow of essential travellers and trade. The agency needed to adapt its operations at a time of considerable uncertainty over the health risks. The need for ArriveCan arose quickly when it became clear that the manual, paper-based processes for tracking the contact tracing and health information of travellers did not meet the needs of the Public Health Agency of Canada. FAC asked the CBSA to assist them by developing a digital form, and the first version of ArriveCan was released 6 weeks later. Over the following 2.5 years, the CBSA responded to the changing health requirements, set out in over 80 orders in council, by releasing 177 different versions of the app. The agency has estimated that the border health measures related to the ArriveCan app cost $55 million, including a number of non-IT costs, such as over $6 million for the Service Canada call centre. The Auditor General and the Procurement Ombud reports have identified a number of very serious weaknesses in procurement and internal controls processes. We have accepted their recommendations, and our management response plans are already underway. I would like to highlight a few of those actions aimed at strengthening the agency's governance and assurance functions. We have strengthened the first line of defence by requiring all HQ staff with financial delegations to retake 4 procurement training courses to help them better understand their responsibilities. Given the weaknesses in procurement oversight, we have established a new Executive Procurement Review Committee to strengthen the second line of defence by reviewing all contracts and task authorizations over $40,000. We have also established a new Procurement Centre of Expertise, which is developing an ongoing programme of quality assurance reviews to ensure compliance with the directive, with a particular focus on the need for proper record keeping. Our management response plans are aligned with the plans of other government departments, as developing the ArriveCan app was a shared responsibility. The agency leveraged PSPC's contracting authorities for over 30 of those contracts and shared Services Canada for 7 contracts. The CBSA was the contracting authority for the remaining 4 contracts. In the first year, the agency was responsible for managing the development, enhancement and operations of the ArriveCan app on behalf of FAC. However, no new funding was received in the 2020-2021 financial year, and the costs were coded to a general COVID-19 pandemic measures account, which would have included other pandemic-related expenditures like personal protective equipment and cleaning. The agency did establish a dedicated financial code in the second year, when funding was provided by FAC and the Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada. And in hindsight, this should have been created much earlier. I am very proud of my employees, colleagues and frontline border services officers who served Canada throughout the pandemic. We acknowledge the very serious deficiencies and welcome the lessons learnt. We are now focused on addressing the recommendations that have already been made. We would be pleased to answer your questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Beginning our first round of questions now, Mr. Brock, you have the floor for 6 minutes.
Chair, and good morning, and thank you for all the witnesses for your attendance today. First line of questioning will be to the Auditor General team. Anyone can answer it. But a couple of weeks ago, mid-March, we heard from both Darren Anthony and Christian Firth, the 2 principal owners of GC Strategies, also known as Government of Canada Strategies, who picked apart the findings in the Auditor General's report. Specifically, Mr. Firth said his reputation had been damaged by false information and what he called an inaccurate report by the AG. Quoted, "Virtually everything reported about my company in the media and stated about me and my company has been false." He said his company was paid $11 million for the ArriveCan, disputing the Auditor General's findings that GC Strategies received almost double that, $19 million. He blamed the discrepancy on flaws in the government's financial systems. We then heard from his partner Darren Anthony, and surprisingly, simply parroted everything that his partner had said, didn't even take the time to actually read your report, didn't take the time to read the report of the Procurement Ombudsman, but had no problem stating that everything was categorically false. Specifically, he said the Auditor General's findings were inaccurate. He says that the report from both AG and Procurement Ombudsman, which found both serious problems with ArriveCan contracts, were wrong, and admitted again that he had not read the report. So I'm sure this is not the first time the AG team has learned about these particular statements. I'd like an opportunity for you to respond on how you feel about these particular statements.
Thank you for the question. I'll start with the findings. we're confident with the findings that we provided to Parliament in our reports. We have a rigorous audit process to make sure that the facts and information that we provide is accurate. With respect to the estimates, we did provide an estimate in the report around the overall cost, and we identified an amount per contractor. There are some facts that absolutely cannot be disputed. In particular, it is a fact that the contractors were paid the amounts that we listed in our report. I should say that they received at least those amounts. Some contractors received more. What is really at issue is whether or not those amounts should be attributed to the ArriveCan app versus work on another IT project. And this is where the poor record keeping problems by CBSA raise this confusion and leave these open questions. Ultimately, in our report, we mentioned that the poor record keeping led us to have to build up an estimate. We used the CBSA's financial systems, the contracting documents, and other evidence to build up this estimate. It is important to remember that our estimate includes more than what was spent on building the app. It also includes amounts for the implementation, maintenance, and other associated costs. And this is because Parliament asked us to look at all aspects of the ArriveCan app. The shortcomings in the documentation
Thank you so much,
and the
Bud.
weak
That's really
controls
cool, amazing.
made it very difficult to
Unnecessary,
precisely
but
attribute
thank you.
costs amongst these elements of ArriveCan. But ultimately, any number that is provided, whether it's CBSA's or ours, is an estimate because of the poor record keeping. I'll stop there.
So let me understand that correctly. The 19 million, the approximate 19 million you attribute to GC strategies. Are you saying that there is room to interpret that as being a combination of ArriveCan contracting and possibly other elements of contracting with the CBSA?
Yes, in our report, we did state that it is possible that some amounts attributed to ArriveCan were not for the application. And indeed, when CBSA provided information to the Government Operations Committee, there were some amounts in the records that they produced there that we didn't consider to be for ArriveCan, and there were amounts that we have considered to be for ArriveCan that CBSA disagrees with. Ultimately, though, we were confident enough with our estimate to put it in a report to Parliament.
Were you confident enough to say that that estimate could have been actually higher than 19 million?
It could have been higher and it could have been lower. I
Okay.
can't be precise. I mean, it is an estimate after all.
Okay. Notwithstanding the comments of both Firth and Anthony at committee several weeks after the release of the AG report, did you hear directly from Firth or Anthony prior to their testimony?
Prior to their testimony, we received a letter from them before we tabled our report.
Did they supply you with any additional documentation to verify their numbers, which were actually closer to 11 million?
Like I said, we received the letter. We built our estimate on the basis of the documentation and the financial system at CBSA, amongst other evidence.
But did they offer to supply you documentation in their possession which established the 11 million figure according to their records?
In their letter, they did offer to provide us information if we required it. However, I would say that like I said, our estimate
Thank
was
you, Mike.
based
That's
on
really
not
cool.
just
Appreciate
what semantically some
Thanks.
contractors are suggesting was the build for ArriveCan. It was for the entire picture of ArriveCan.
Thank you, Mr. Brock. That is your time. Next up, Ms. Khalid, joining us virtually. You have the floor, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for appearing today. Mr. Moore, you had said in your opening remarks about lessons learned. Well, those lessons have cost taxpayers millions of dollars, including, like the behavior of bureaucrats, including conservative insiders like David Yao and from Dalian. So perhaps we can take a step back and try to understand what exactly happened here. And how we can make sure that the public service is accountable to Canadians with this very important issue. So can you please perhaps help us explain the function of what comptrollership branch at Canada Border Service Agency really does?
So very happy to explain. So I was not personally responsible for ArriveCan, But as a member of the CBSA's Executive Committee, I am accountable for the failures, and we have already taken note of those failures, and we've already started to deal with them. In terms of ArriveCAN, it was managed by the Border Task Force, and actually the controllership branch was mainly focused on managing the internal task force during the COVID pandemic. These were very, very difficult times. This was a time where people were crossing the border to return back to Canada, when we were told that we could catch COVID from touching documents. So our number one priority initially, working with FAC, was to get the form up and running. That cost about $80,000. The controllership branch involvement in this one was really around making sure we had the funding available for that. And we recognise the comments made by the Auditor General, and in year one we did not have an accounting code. And so we were not identifying the ArriveCAN cost separately. That is one of the reasons why we have different cost estimates included in the numbers. And in fact, actually, that's also recognised in the OAG report itself in paragraph 1.24, which does identify that $53 million was the estimate for the OAG for the public health component, with a further $6.2 million included for the customs declaration. But we recognise that, in year one, we did not have the information available to us, and so it was estimates in both cases. So that was our primary role in terms of the first year. We were looking after the finances, but we were also working extensively on the internal task force.
Thank you.
Don't mean to pause, guys, but I've got to acknowledge the generosity that's in the chat room today. Mr. Pickles and Bud Wilson, these memberships, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I don't push that stuff, so don't feel like I do appreciate it. I don't have a lot ready for the memberships. It's a time balance thing. We're going to jump right back into the politics, but thank you all for your generosity, Mr. Pickles. Bud, those things are incredible to me. Anyway, back to the show, because
I appreciate that. Now, you had said that you were not personally involved in the development of the ArriveCAN app, but perhaps you can provide us with a high-level overview of what kind of lessons that or topics that are covered in the mandatory retraining of staff at the CBSA as part of your response to the Auditor General's report.
So I think the first thing I would say is we have to look at the 2 or 3 lines of defence. So the first line of defence is based within the Information Science and Technologies branch. They were responsible for the ArriveCAN app, for the development and operations of that application. We have over 1,600 delegated financial officers within the agency. Around about 900 of those are based in headquarters. Quite a large number of those individuals are based in the Border Technologies and Innovation Directorate, which was directly responsible for the development of the app and also for the contracting functions working with PSPC. So what we were doing there is looking at the failures of the first line of defence. And we have no doubt there were failures in the first line of defence in terms of governance, in terms of oversight, in terms of record keeping, and all of those things are lessons we have learned. They're also potentially, subject to the investigations to look at whether there was any wrongdoing in some of those failures. We recognise that there were failures. We're not entirely sure exactly what the reason for those failures, whether they were because of the stress of the pandemic or whether there was any wrongdoing included in that. And we should wait for the investigations to conclude on that matter. The second line of defence is where the controllership branch is involved. And what we do every year, we take a sample of about 5,000 non-pay transactions and we look to see if they're being properly processed. On average, we find around about 9 to 10% of errors. That is not satisfactory to us. Our target is less than 5%. We were very disappointed to see the Auditor General's report, which identified 18% of those errors. We are looking into the reasons for that, and some of those reasons are because there wasn't a separate cost centre code. So there was an administrative error in that the individual invoices were not being coded to the right account because we didn't have that separate code. So those were really the basic functions of the first line and the second line of defence.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. And to Mr. Hayes, are there any lessons learned here with respect to contracting within your own office with all of this coming to light?
Thank you. We take the contracting responsibilities at our office very seriously. We are rigorous with our contracting. What we have learned though from this audit and implemented in our office is more awareness around conflict of interest declarations, and I would say also increasing the awareness for all of our managers of the importance of making sure that documentation is kept in a very, very accurate way.
And so you've taken concrete steps going forward with respect to conflict of interest in your office?
Yes, we have. Indeed, we always do have an annual process for conflict of interest declarations. We have increased some of that awareness work that we do by sending out reminders to our staff, by raising with staff the fact that the clerk has issued a report on values and ethics in the public service, and there is training available for our staff that we always encourage.
Et voilà, merci beaucoup. Suivant, c'est Madame.
That's it. Ms. Cycle-Desgagnés, please, you have the floor for 6 minutes, please. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. I'd also like to ask questions of Mr. Moore to begin with. Mr. Moore, your title, Controllership Director, you've held that title since 2018, in fact, and you were responsible for the internal control of the CBSA, whilst everything that occurred between 2020, 2021, the awarding of contracts, etc., during that whole time, do you think that you did your job well, or did you even do your job at all? Thank you very much for your question.
I do believe I did my job well during the pandemic. It was a very difficult period in time. I was appointed in January of 2018, so I was there for the entirety of the pandemic. It was a very challenging time for the agency as a whole. As I have said previously, I was responsible for the internal task force, which was primarily based on our employees, making sure they have PPE available to them, making sure that we were managing the work from home directive and managing all of the internal functions of the agency. I was not directly responsible for the border task force. However, I did have oversight in terms of the finances. As I said before, I was responsible for ensuring we had sufficient funding to manage the border task force activities, and I was also responsible for the second line of defence, as I previously described. So I'm very proud of what we did during the pandemic. I know we made mistakes, and I know we've learnt lessons from those mistakes, but they were mistakes in the context of an operational crisis for us, with people coming across the border where we had to manage.
Mr. Moore, all the countries across the world had to deal with that crisis, and very few of them forked out $60 million for an app like ArriveCan. Now, in some countries, self-respecting countries, there are internal control mechanisms, especially in important services like the Canada Border Services Agency, who do their job and avoid these kinds of occurrences where there are non-competitive contracts that are awarded to companies of two individuals. There are internal control mechanisms across many countries, and you used the term oversight, that you play a supervisory role in all of that. And given that you did have an oversight role, you are accountable. You are accountable to taxpayers who've paid far too much for this app. Moreover, your signature can be found on a letter that was sent in the spring of 2020 stating that GC Strategies absolutely needed to get a contract for a duration of 3 years, but you also said that the emergency exception or carve-out should be applied. Now that's a problem. If it's urgent, well, you don't fork out $3 million or millions of dollars over a short period. Yes, you issue a contract in short order, but a contract of a small amount. So how is it that you were responsible for financial control, and yet you sent out a letter for an emergency exception to be applied, whereas Mr. Bunatuno's advice was to have a 3-year contract for millions of dollars, which was way above and beyond what the app was supposed to cost at the outset. How do you justify that you signed that letter in May 2020?
So I think there were a number of different questions in there. We do not have details about other countries, but we do understand there were also significant costs involved in managing travellers across borders in other countries, in particular in the Border 5 and the European Union. But I want to just come back to the national security exemption letter. I recognise that I did sign that in June of 2020, and that was at the request of PSBC to allow them to put in place the second contract for GC strategies. They had already done the first contract for GC strategies in I think it was in March, but they needed to do the second contract. And I referred at the OGO committee last week to the comments around we identified a supplier that was successfully implemented a modern tool for risk assessment. As I identified last week, that was a company called Lixar. What I have learned since last week was actually Lixar was working in strategic partnership with GC strategies. And so I accept that, that the testimony of the PSPC Deputy Minister was correct in that this letter directly led to the second contract for GC strategies. So that is what the National Security letter was used for. Only one contract was let under that National Security exemption letter. The others were let under the FAC originated National Security exemption letter.
Mais pourtant, dans une lettre...
And yet, in a letter that was shared with the committee, you insist that GC strategies, you insisted that that company should be used on the basis of that exemption. You insisted that that company would receive millions of dollars, even though it was indeed for the second contract. What was the amount of that second contract? Do you have that information at your disposal? The second contract awarded to GC strategies, please.
So I do, but I also would just like to say that I did not in that letter insist on GC strategies. That was a decision made by the Board of Technologies and Innovation Director. I was not aware of their name. And actually in the letter it does not mention a name of an individual company.
Non, mais vous mentionnez que pour des raisons de sécurité, il faut...
No, but you stated for security reasons a contract needed to be issued very quickly, and it was the second contract. You just confirmed that, didn't you?
I agree. So there were 3 contracts in total issued by PSPC, all through a sole source agreement under the cover of the national security exemption. The second one was issued with an initial value of $4.4 million. Total expenditures after contract amendments amounted to 11.1 million.
Vous trouvez normal
Do you think that it's normal? Thank you very much, ma'am. Unfortunately, your time's run out. I apologize. Next up, Mr. Desjardins.
For 6 minutes, please. You're joining us virtually. Over to you, Mr. Desjardins.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank the witnesses for being present with us today. It is a troubling fact that Arrive Canada has cost Canadians millions and millions of dollars while we're experiencing a cost of living crisis. Canadians, whether they're paying rent or just trying to pay their bills, are seeing things go up and getting more expensive. At the same time, it's troubling that their government is spending, without seeming care or oversight, expensive and extreme outsourced contracts. And this is, I think, the crux of my concern, and one that I'll focus on in my questions to our witnesses. We know that, for example, from our statements from the union representatives at CBSA, that there's a double crisis that's happening right now. The crisis of the dramatic underfunding of our public service that has largely created a vulnerability to which CBSA has been forced, in some sense, to outsource, looking for the expertise that they don't have. The other problem is when CBSA is given that longer leash, it seems as though things get way out of hand. We see multiple breaches of very basic levels of accounting, of reporting, and I'd argue of basic ethics to be able to even disclose facts of when or how or if there was influence by private contractors and preferred access to private contractors, particularly when we look at the evidence that the Auditor General has found. I want to turn to finding 1.28 in the report for us to look at. It quotes, the Canadian Border Service Agency determined that it would need to rely on external resources to develop the web-based and mobile application because it did not have sufficient internal capacity with the skills needed. We know that since 2006, as early as then, there's this rapid increase in outsourced contracts by the Government of Canada. We see that in instances like the Phoenix pay system, where we give a contract from the government, it gets out of control, and these private contractors then endlessly bill the taxpayer for, in this case, even task authorizations that were not completed. Basic levels of mistrust, I think, that were breached here. In addition, finding 1.29, the Auditor General found that as time went on, the agency continued to rely heavily on external resources. You can see Exhibit 1.2. Reduced reliance on external resources would have decreased the total cost of the application and enhanced value for money. This is, I think, the most important piece to some of this work, to know that at a time when you could have reassessed some of the task authorizations, even if the task authorizations had information relevant to what they were doing or who was doing it, there would have been an opportunity to reduce the overall cost of some of this work. You can look, for example, on that exhibit submitted by the Auditor General's office of the tremendous cost that this bears against the public. It's now, I think, incredibly important that the checks and balances you mentioned at the onset of your testimony, Mr. Moore, aren't only just listened to today in this committee, but are actually enforced, because I often find in this committee we have officials such as yourself who, in this particular instance, we see a massive breach of public trust. The attempt to rebuild that public trust is often words and recommendations put forward by the Auditor General. But what I find troubling is sometimes these recommendations don't fully meet where they're target or not enforced. And that's troubling for me. So I'm going to be requesting at the end of our meeting that we investigate follow-up opportunities for your appearance here and follow up on some of the recommendation enforcement, because the enforcement aspect of this is important to me, because it has to change. This just can't continue the way it is. I'm nervous that this could be going on in other ministries or even continuing in your ministry if we don't continue to see some of these checks and balances properly addressed and fully implemented. It's true that we know CBSA has also, you just mentioned, Mr. Moore, was approached by the Public Service and Procurement Canada during an instance of the second contract when they reviewed the first set of contracts and determined that they were insufficient for the purposes of being competitive because of their non-competitive nature, and recommended a competitive process. Is it your letter that you just submitted, or that you admitted, that was signed in May of 2020, is it the case that was that your response to the initial inquiry by Public Service and Procurement Canada? Mr. Moore.
So actually, I signed the national security exemption on the 1st
You guys
of
are
June,
cracking me up.
2020.
Can't help it. You're really
it was not
funny.
in response, because those comments received from PSPC were sent directly to the Information Science and Technologies branch. They did not come to the CFO's branch. And so we were not aware of any of that feedback from PSPC at the time. It was being sent to the Board of Technologies and Innovation Directorate. In terms of
considering that PSAC understood the nature of how non-competitive contracts could be abused, why is it that you weren't able to do such a thing?
We were not aware. We were only aware of that during these inquiries. So at the time, they were engaging directly with the Information Science and Technology branch. That has now been stopped. So what part of our procurement improvement plan is that all contracting has to go through our procurement directorate, which is within the controllership branch.
And why wasn't that the case prior to this and for so long?
I think it was because we were taking reliance on our other government department partners, especially during a very busy time for all of us. So as I said previously in my introductory, over 30 of the contracts for ArriveCAN were actually, the contract authority was PSPC, and there is a service level agreement between CBSA and PSPC, which sets out the requirements of CBSA as the technical authority and PSPC as the contract authority.
And thank you. I'm afraid that is the time, Mr. Desjardins. We will, of course, be back to you shortly. Beginning our second round, Mr. Barrett, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Mr. Vleeming, on GC Strategies' now deleted website, they had a number of testimonials from senior government officials. In one case, the Government of Canada Chief Information Officer was quoted as saying, quote, GC Strategies understands our needs on a business and technical level, end quote. Who would have said that?
Thank you for the question. I've only been at the CBSA for 11 months, so I was not CIO at the time. Prior to me, Min Doan was CIO over the last, I think, 5 years.
Has anyone asked Mr. Doan if that was him?
I am not aware of that.
Who else could it have been? So we've established it wasn't you?
If the reference was specifically to who was the Chief Information Officer of the CBSA in the last 5 years, that would have been Mindone.
Okay, but it wasn't you that said it?
That's correct.
Are you aware that it was said?
I am
Or
not aware
alleged
that
to
it was
have been said? You're not familiar?
All I've heard is the testimony of committees that referencing that certain testimonials on the GC Strategies website.
And did it cause you concern that endorsement had been offered by
It
CIO?
surprised me, as you wouldn't typically see that, at least in my experience.
In another example, the chief data officer for the public sector said, quote, GC Strategies, see the bigger picture and do not chase the quick sale. Who would have said that?
I'm not actually aware of who the chief data officer was at the time, sorry.
Has anyone tried to find out who said it?
I'm not part of the internal investigation, which I would assume is also going to be looking at that.
In another case, a Government of Canada senior executive said, quote, GC Strategies listen and try to find solutions to my problems versus selling me a solution to a problem I've never had. Who would have said that?
Not aware of that either.
So we don't know. Could it have been Mindone?
It's impossible for me to answer that, as there's no details on who actually said that and what their position was.
I'm a bit surprised that even a basic level of curiosity wouldn't have encouraged you to find out if your predecessor, on an unnamed basis, but only using the title that you now have, had actually said something like that, and then now occupying that position, would not have sought remediation, that is, for it to be taken down. Did you ask for it to be taken down by GC Strategies?
No, as far as I'm aware, it's certainly not against any rules or laws to put that up there, and I'm not sure the government has the ability to
But you could ask if
private
it's not
industry.
true. But
Again, if it's not against the law, I'm not aware of them violating any rules by putting that up there. It's just not something I would typically expect.
so it's compliant with the values and ethics codes for the public service.
As far as I'm aware, that would be compliant with the Values and Ethics Code.
Well, I can tell you, if someone who previously held my position said something that I fundamentally disagreed with, and it was attributed in current time by job title only, I'd at least ask the person who had it posted, because I value my reputation and think it's important to the integrity of the institution that I represent that things that are demonstrably false don't continue to stand. I would hope that people who represent in senior positions the Government of Canada on behalf of all Canadians would exercise that same basic due diligence, because we have let's be clear, this is a two-person shady company operating out of a basement that get paid tens of millions of dollars, and they're close enough, they're now alleging that they're close enough with the Liberal government senior officials that they're able to provide testimonials. I'm surprised that you'd be unaware that there hasn't been an investigation of that. Have you, sir, or the current CBSA executives had any contact with Christian Firth or Darren Anthony?
I have not met either of those.
Have you had contact with them?
No, never.
No phone calls, emails, text messages?
Nothing at all.
Okay, Mr. Moore, same question.
No, I've had no contact. No, I've had no contact at all with GC Strategies or any of their employees.
Do you know when the last contact with the person that previously occupied your position, Mr. Vleming, when Mindone would have last contacted them?
I'm not aware of that specific date, no.
Mr. Moore, are you aware of their last contact with the agency?
No, but I know that we ceased paying them in June of 2023.
In June of 2023?
That's right.
Right. Nearly a year after concerns had been brought to the attention of CBSA
Quick question, Mr.
through
Mayor.
the work of conservatives at standing committees of Parliament. I have more questions for
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt. Just want to make sure you got it under the wire. Next up, Ms. Yip, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you. Thank you for coming today. My question is for Mr. Moore or Mr. Vleming. Did I pronounce that right? Thank you. For the benefits of Canadians watching, can you explain what staff augmentation is?
So I'd be very happy to start, and then maybe Darryl can take over. So staff augmentation is when an organization decides to build something in-house but doesn't have all of the skills required to do that. And so staff augmentation is when you bring in contractors, often on a day rate or sometimes on a rate for a fixed product. And staff augmentation is widespread throughout the Government of Canada. And if I go back to the Deputy Minister of DND's testimony to this committee, he identified that actually it was a necessity to have staff augmentation because sometimes it's not very easy for individual contractors to get contracts with the Government of Canada. It requires an awful lot of work to actually secure those contracts. So going through a staff augmentation specialist does add value to those individuals, small and medium-sized enterprises. Also, hiring in the public service is not very easy. And I think in particular for issues like sort of technical architects, cloud architects, there was not enough in the Government of Canada. I think the previous CIO talked about sort of 25-30% shortfall in the number of people who are in-house. So we are trying to increase the number of people in-house, but it's not easy to get it. Also, the skill set may not be valid for money for the public sector. If you have a very technical specialist, we may not have sufficient work for them to do over a long period of time. And also for short-term assignments and projects, they're very important. So staff augmentation has its purpose. I think PSBC gave evidence that there's over 600 different companies which are actually providing staff augmentation. The issue here is how we used it. And we definitely agree that we used it too much and we used it for too long. And maybe I'll hand over to Mr. Vleeming now to talk a bit about what we're trying to do to reduce the requirement.
Yeah, certainly we've drastically reduced the number of contractors. In the 11 months I've been here, we've gone down over 25%. And we're on target for the end of this next fiscal to drop down probably another 25%. To Mr. Moore's point, staff augmentation is well used in government and in private sector as well, but it has to be used in the right way. So it needs to be used for surge capacity when you don't have the staff. It shouldn't be the case where contractors are around for years and years and years, because then there's other methods that should be used, like training your existing staff, so you don't become reliant on those contractors.
Thank you. Could you give an example of what type of contractors you are using that would provide value for money?
It typically is around
Tony,
the
hello
cutting-edge
everybody. Like I'm
technology,
trying
including
not
what was
to
Arrive
speak
Chem
over
was
the
built on.
politicians,
So
but I
if
do
you think
like
about modern
saying hello
cloud
to people.
applications that,
If I miss
are
anybody,
using very
that's never the
cutting-edge,
intention.
Tools.
But it does
Often
happen.
the in-house staff doesn't have
Back to
those
the show.
skills. But what should occur is contractors should be brought in for a specific initiative on those skill sets, but then they should also be used to cross-train your existing staff. That then allows your existing staff to take over going forward, and you don't become reliant on those contractors. And so our approach going forward is to take that sort of scenario versus becoming reliant on them. And that's how we'll be able to reduce our long-term reliance on those contractors.
Could you tell me a bit about the Executive Procurement Review Committee? What are their responsibilities? What is this committee all about?
So maybe if I'll take that. So I established the Executive Procurement Review Committee last October, and this is to address many of the high findings in the OAG report, but also in the Procurement Ombudsman report. This is to deal with the second line of defence, which was clearly lacking during the COVID period for us. So now the Executive Procurement Review Committee looks at every single contract and every single task authorization above $40,000. We have about 1,500 contracts across the CBSA, so that's a significant requirement. But this is about ensuring that we do make this change stick. We do make sure that this applies across the agency as a whole. And maybe in time, if we start to see performance improving, we could raise those limits. So we've had over a dozen meetings of this. It meets on average at least once a week. And we go through all of these different proposals. And in the case of Mr. Vleeming's branch, a presentation will be made to the committee to say this is what we aim to do, and there will be questions will be asked about is it compliant with the procurement controls and measures. We will ask for procurement directorate to give us assurance that is completely compliant. So it's there as a second line of defence to ensure this never happens again.
Is this committee permanent or temporary?
It has been established as a permanent committee of the Executive Committee. In an ideal world, if we became absolutely perfect at procurement, then you wouldn't need this committee. But I think actually even in an ideal world, providing that level of additional oversight is always going to be valuable to the agency.
Thank you. And that is your time, Ms. Ship. Encore une fois, Madame Sinclair-Degagné.
Ms. Sinclair-Degagné, 2.5 minutes, please. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. I'd like to direct my questions at Mr. Wiemings, please, now. Mr. Wieming, you've been in your position for about 11 months, is that correct? Now, did you play another role in terms of private companies, aside from what is normally a very busy role of CIO?
Est-ce que vous jouez un autre rôle?
Did you play another role outside your role of CIO, or do you currently do so?
I sit on a charity board and another board, that's all.
L'autre conseil d'administration, vous siégez?
The other board you sit on is a private company called Pillar 9, is that correct?
Oui.
Combien de temps?
Yes. How much time does that take up to provide advice on the board of a private company, please?
It's a very small commitment, probably on average, maybe 5 hours a month.
Considérez-vous que vous avez...
Do you feel that you have enough time to do that, given that you hold a very important position and you need to tidy up house at the CBSA?
Yes, I'm comfortable that I'm able to do both.
D'accord. Et vous considérez pas qu'il y a un...
I see. And you don't perceive there to be any problem of being on the board of a private company? If I understand it, the company provides data solutions. It's a company that may at some point in time work for the Government of Canada in some way. You don't think that there's a conflict of interest or an appearance of conflict of interest working for such a company on their board?
So what Pillar 9 does is provide the MLS services specifically to realtors in Alberta, so there is no chance it would ever work for the Government of Canada. Secondly, when I joined, I immediately did file a conflict of interest report that went through the proper channels and was ultimately signed off by our president.
Ah, vous avez rempli ça.
Ah, so you did fill out that form. There are a lot of folks that actually don't fill out that infamous form. That's what we heard at a committee last week, in fact. Now, I do have a number of other questions. Just before you became CIO for the CBSA, you were CIO for a company called Aurora Cannabis. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Aurora Cannabis.
Aurora Cannabis. Well, did that company undergo hacking while you were CIO?
Yes, it did in December 25th of 2000, I believe.
Est-ce qu'on a comme information par rapport...
Do any have information? Sorry, Ms. Sikla-Degagne. Can he respond to the question at least, please? No? Mr. Desjardins.
2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. I do want to turn now to one of the findings of the Auditor General in relation to information not being found. Finding 1.18 throughout to the findings suggests that financial records were not well maintained by Canada Border Service Agency. The Auditor General's office was unable to determine a precise cost for the ArriveCan application because of poor documentation and weak controls at Canada Border Service Agency. To both Mr. Moore, Mr. Vleming, who's responsible for, within the ministry, who's responsible for financial records?
So under the directive, the Treasury Board Directive on Service and Digital, all employees at all levels are responsible for documenting decisions and activities. So that is a responsibility of everybody who works in the CBSA. Their managers are responsible for ensuring that they meet those requirements, and actually the CIO is responsible for ensuring we have an information management system to allow that to happen. What I would say is during the COVID period, it was more difficult as a result of many people in headquarters having to work from home. But that's not an excuse. I think that's just a recognition that during that period, it was more difficult to maintain those records.
And so you're in your own words, you're saying that everyone in the ministry is responsible. At what point does anyone in the ministry actually raise the alarm bell? Why didn't you, Mr. Moore?
Because, I talked earlier around the delegation of financial signing authorities. Under the delegations, all of these decisions were made by a level below mine. So I would be responsible for signing contracts which are within my own organisation.
But Mr. Moore, you just said it's everyone's responsibility, unless you're not in the ministry, to raise an alarm when they see mismanagement or bad practice. In this case, you're saying that you're not responsible because it was below your pay grade. It was below your authorization?
No,
At
I'm
what
not
point
saying-
are officials such as yourself and others who are involved directly in ArriveCan, privy to information of ArriveCan, have access to the contracts of ArriveCan, at what point do you actually say, this is unreasonable, this is not, Canadians can't expect this? Non-competitive contracts, contracts that have no task authorizations, and even worse, there are instances where we don't even have information as to the contractors or how much they charged. Mr. Moore, this is serious, and it's something that I don't
Mr. Desjardins,
can't
I'm going to
understand.
allow. I'm going to allow a response. Your time is virtually up.
Please, yeah,
Mr. Moore, do you have
why
an
aren't
answer,
you
please?
responsible?
I would say it's very serious, and we're taking these recommendations very seriously in our implementation. But I was not responsible, but as the CFO at that time, I was accountable, and I accept that. And that's why we're putting in place all these additional controls and measures.
Thank you very much. Turning now to Mr. Nader, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and again, thank you to our witnesses for joining us here this morning. At a recent public accounts meeting, Danny Richard, President of the Canadian Financial Officers, testified that between the three departments in question here, there are over 1,000 members in those departments, including 5 members who flagged issues with management. But we understand that very few, perhaps a dozen of these financial officers were actually involved in this procurement process. Mr. Moore, are you concerned by this?
So I'm concerned by a number of the points Mr. Richard made, and I do regularly communicate with him. And I want to identify what more we can do to actually improve the financial manager organisation within the within CBSA. But you know, sort of where we are in terms of the delegation of financial instruments is the majority of the controls are at the manager level, and we then have financial manager advisors who are engaged in the strategic financial management. They do not sign task authorizations, they do not sign invoices and Section 32 and Section 34 responsibilities. But if they identified wrongdoing or any issues associated with that, they would be responsible for bringing them forward to us.
Well, frankly, there were problems identified and nothing happened, and I think that's on you, sir. I want to move on, though, but we know there are a number of current investigations ongoing in a number of venues, but most concerning is obviously the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the RCMP, the Mounties. Our concern here is that Min Doan's emails have magically disappeared. The Chief Technology Officer couldn't save his emails, which is rather concerning, rather than perplexing, and I'm sure the RCMP are very intrigued and interested by that. I want to know from you, Mr. Moore, what are you doing to recover those emails?
So that is subject to an internal investigation and potentially also an RCMP investigation. I'm not privy to either of those investigations, so I can't comment on where they are. In terms of what we are doing to recover those emails, maybe I'll ask Mr. Vleeming to explain.
Thank you. So this is actually being run by our internal investigation as well, including the recovery side of things to ensure there's no conflict of interest. And so I'm not aware of any more information, not privy to that internal investigation.
To you, Mr. Vleeming, how easy is it to permanently delete all your emails without a trace?
It is actually surprisingly easy. The reality is that Shared Services Canada is accountable for email and the policies around that, and a person can choose to delete their emails. It is retained for 30 days where they can't permanently, and after that it is deleted.
Surprisingly easy. I am, quite frankly, shocked by the fact that the Government of Canada, with all the resources of the state behind it, cannot preserve the emails of someone in a position like Min Doan when there is a criminal investigation ongoing and these documents simply disappeared. I think that's incredibly concerning. I want to move on. Mr. Hayes, to you, in your opening comment, you echoed many of the concerns that were previously raised by yourself and by the Auditor General about lack of records, not having paper trails, just things not existing. We received a letter recently from the Department of Public Services and Procurement Canada, the supposed experts on procurement, and the Assistant Deputy Minister wrote this. On February 2nd, 2017, PSPC awarded a contract to GC Strategies for $24,977 through a supply arrangement for professional services to provide business and technical learning to PSPC employees using a new client relationship management system. A search of PSPC systems found references to the contract, including the total amount. However, the contract document itself was misplaced during a reorganization and relocation of hard copy files. So the department's supposed to be the experts on procurement is losing documents on procurement and on contracts. What's more, Treasury Board Secretariat, a central agency, wrote to us and said, on behalf of the Treasury Board Secretariat, we have a no response to expanded motion is provided, no response to GC Strategies, yet in the Public Accounts of Canada, it lists GC Strategies as having received an account or the contract for the Treasury Board Secretariat. So here we have two key agencies, neither of which can account for their own contracts with GC Strategies. Is that a concern from the Auditor General's office?
We would expect that proper books and records are kept on contracts and on payments made under those contracts for the full period of the retention periods required by law. So obviously there are times where hard copies might be misplaced, and it's important to find them. We've constantly made recommendations and findings about the importance of good record management and accurate data collection. So yes, I would express concern over the fact that contract documents can't be located.
Thank you very much. That is your time, Mr. Nader. Turn now to Ms. Bradford joining us virtually. You have the floor for up to 5 minutes, please, Ms. Bradford.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the witnesses for joining us this morning. Getting back to the Executive Procurement Review Committee.
If anyone needs a bathroom break,
who sits on
this
that,
might be the time, because this is going to be a crock of...
Mr.
Mr.
Moore?
Big dump.
Very happy to answer that question. So I chaired it for the first 8 meetings, and then it's actually the chair has now been taken over by the Executive Vice President, because the President wanted to demonstrate her commitment to ensuring that we make these changes and implement the recommendations arising from the recommendations in the 2 audit reports. It comprises a number of vice presidents, but it also comprises technical specialists from the Procurement Directorate and a number of other sort of assurance providers, including security and including internal audit. So it's a wide-ranging committee with the mandate to challenge all of the proposals that are coming up and to seek assurance that all of the procurement rules and regulations are being complied with.
What would be the total number of members on the committee?
I think it's getting on for 10 to 12, depending on the numbers who are attending.
And how often do they meet?
Well, as I said earlier, the idea is to have it weekly. I think ultimately it would like to become bi-weekly, but at the moment the volume of activity is requiring a weekly meeting.
And does the committee review all contracts, or how do they decide which ones to look at if they don't look at all of them?
So initially we set a level of $40,000. So below $40,000, we've delegated authority to the Procurement Directorate. Anything above $40,000 for contract or task authorizations has to come to the committee. In addition, at the moment, anything above $1 million has to also go to the whole Executive Committee, which includes the President and the Executive Vice President.
So why was the amount of $40,000 chosen as a threshold?
That was on the advice of the Procurement Directorate, based on the level of risk associated with contracts above and below that limit.
So what would happen if the committee were to have concerns with a contract during one of their reviews? What action would be taken?
So it has already happened a number of times. So normally the action is to go back and ask additional questions, which have to come back with answers. So we have seen some contracts come back to the committee 2 or 3 times, depending on whether all the questions are answered. Ultimately, it's an approval committee. So if it is not approved by the Procurement Review Committee, it will not go ahead.
Now, Mr. Moore, in your opening remarks, you actually mentioned that about $6 million was spent on non-IT costs for ArriveCan. Could you explain what kind of expenses were included in the non-IT amounts?
Well, so $6.1 million was spent with Service Canada, their call centre. So the call centre was set up to take questions from members of the travelling public. They actually managed over 645,000 calls during the period under review. That was for individuals returning to Canada who may had questions around ArriveCAN, had questions around the vaccine certification and others. So that was one example of a non-IT related cost. But we do recognise that the majority of these costs were IT related.
Okay, so both Mr. Moore and Mr. Vlaming, have either of you worked with Mindone, Cameron McDonald, or Anthony Utano before?
So I joined the agency, as I said earlier, in January of 2018. Mindone was certainly there at the time, and so I've worked with him as a colleague on the executive committee. I had less to do with Cameron McDonald or Mr. Utano because they reported directly to Mindone. But we did see them occasionally at some executive committee meetings.
And Mr. Vlaming, what was your interaction with any of these individuals?
I've never worked directly with him at the CBSA. When Mr. Doan was CTO of Canada, I had a number of interactions as relevant to that role.
Okay, could you elaborate on those interactions?
So as Chief Technology Officer, there's a number of monthly meetings with all the CIOs around town that I would have attended as well. And additionally, I did meet with Min shortly after I joined just to get a debrief on the ISTB function at CBSA.
So did either of you have any concerns about their contact with their conduct with the contractors during the early days of the pandemic and during the development of the ArriveCAN app?
No,
Either one of you?
I had no concerns, and no concerns were raised at our level. I think just the context of how busy we were during that period, it was all hands on deck. We were working incredibly long hours on a large number of different things. So it was very difficult to establish the same procedures and protocols as we are doing now.
Thank you very much. That is the time. Beginning our third round, Mr. Viersen joining us virtually. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank the witnesses for being here today. Mr. Moore, presumably your department has emergency planning in place. Would that be the case?
Yes, so we have a standing emergency plan which was utilised during the pandemic. As I've said earlier, we established 3 separate governance committees. We decided to split the operational crisis management committees into 2. The internal task force, which I chaired, and the border task force, which was chaired by the vice president of the Travellers branch. They both reported to the emergency management committee, which was the executive committee. In the early days, that committee met daily throughout, 24/7 essentially. Over time, that frequency of those meetings started to go down slightly. But it was definitely operating in an emergency management approach across the entire country, because also all of the individual regions were having to manage with a vast change in their approach to how they operated the border. A lot of the ports of entry, certainly the ones which were commercial, were operating incredibly hard, whereas some of the traveller ones actually saw a very big reduction in the volume because of the volumes.
Was this the first time you've experienced
just one
in
second,
your role?
Mr. Viersen, I have a point of order. Yes, Ms. Yep.
I just would like the chair to remind those in the room not to take photos.
Oh.
Thank you.
I did not catch that. You are absolutely correct. There should be no photos. I'm going to have the clerk check with you, Ms. Yip, as to who you spotted, and I will instruct the clerk to have them delete the photo or photos. If you would just check that, I'll keep running the meeting. Thank you, Ms. Yip. Turning now back to Mr. Viersen, you have 3.5 minutes to go, please. Over to you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Moore, in your time as in your position, is this the first time your department used this emergency planning procedure?
It uses it on sadly on 2 regular basis. So, for example, I think a few months ago where there was the tragic accident in the United States around Rainbow Bridge, the Southern Ontario region had to bring in their emergency planning for that. especially during the period when it could have been considered to be a terrorist attack. So any operational activity at the border, we will bring in our emergency management procedures.
Okay, so this is not the first time that this has happened. It seems unique then that there would be a general COVID fund. Was that unique?
So it was unique, but it was also a product of what we were having to do. So, for example, we had to increase the cleaning of our ports of entry and to do it twice a day rather than once a day. We had to secure, with the help of the Public Health Agency and PSPC, all of the PPE. We had to buy sanitization cabinets to allow the officers to actually steam, clean their tools and things like that. So lots of different things.
It was a very broad fund.
It was a very broad fund covering a number of different activities.
Okay, so you would say like a COVID slush fund.
It was definitely not a COVID slush fund. It was an emergency management fund. And in the first year, we provided $5 million to the Information Science and Technology branch to partially cover their costs of the first year of the ArriveCan app.
From soup to nuts, you could put that in that fund, or it was basically an expense account.
Well, it was an emergency management committee decision. So all decisions went to the emergency management committee, who decided what they were going to be funding with that money.
Okay. What kind of oversight did the minister have of that particular fund?
So the minister had no oversight on that because we were taking this money from our operational funding. So when the minister has oversight when the mains estimates are agreed or when supplementary estimates are agreed, but that would be the only time the minister would have oversight.
Would he have known about this COVID slush fund?
He certainly would not. He probably would not have known about the emergency management fund, but I can't comment on whether the president at that time referred to it.
So from protective gloves, masks, cleaning equipment to IT sourcing, that would have all gone through the same funding.
Yes, and in the first year it was about $20 million in total.
And so you can see how the Auditor General would have had a challenge in dissecting this particular slush fund.
Well, I think I do, and I said at the start, we did not have a separate code for all the different activities. It did all go into this fund, and we learned that lesson. That was a mistake. We should have set up separate codes at the start, but I'm afraid that is part of a problem of being able to identify exactly where the funding went to.
Hence, the conclusion that this was a slush fund rather than an emergency management fund. Mr. Chair, I think that's my time. Thank you very much.
That is, Mr. Beerson. Thank you very much. Turning now to Ms. Shanahan, joining us virtually. You have the floor, Ms. Shanahan. Over to you, please.
Well, thank you very much, Chair, and I too thank the witnesses for appearing here today, and I do appreciate some of the testimony that we heard just prior regarding the Emergency Management Fund. So I'd like to ask Mr. Moore if there's anything that he can add to that, because having a border, one of the largest land borders in my riding, I have many workers, CBSA workers, who live in the riding of Chateauguay-Lacolle, and I know how much they were working during that time and the pressures that they had in addition to their
This is a
usual
pretty
duties.
crazy thing, and it's going to heat up yet.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, I'd like to hear more. Yes.
Our priority at all times was the health and safety of our officers at the front line and also our staff in headquarters. So providing them with sufficient PPE to do their job, which at that time was considered to be a very dangerous job. They were meeting people who were returning to the country who may well have had COVID. And as I have said previously, there was a lot of fear about whether they could catch COVID from touching papers. That's one of the main reasons why the ArriveCan app was developed, to allow that information to be given electronically. So definitely, our officers were looking for reassurance, and we provided that reassurance to the best of our ability. We provided it through PPE. As I've said before, we provided it through sanitization cabinets, which weren't available in all ports of entry, but now they're a standard feature in the ports of entry. So we took the health and safety very seriously, and that was all managed through the internal task force.
And Mr. Moore, you mentioned in your opening remarks something to the effect of should have been created earlier. So I just want to clarify, are you talking about the ArriveCan app? Because I know in my travels, including Australia, the electronic border entry app is mandatory and is certainly very critical to the proper management of border entry.
No, I think I was talking about setting up a separate accounting code, but actually the app was developed in just about 6 weeks, which was incredibly fast given the challenges which everyone was facing at the time of COVID. You know, the Auditor General did identify there was an ongoing benefit from the ArriveCan app because it is still used, and in fact I used it yesterday myself, and by using it in airports, about 300,000 people a month do use it, so just over 3.5 million people.
I appreciate that, and I do agree. And with that, Chair, I move that when the committee undertakes to invite witnesses, that a witness list submission deadline be set by the Chair with the explicit consent of the committee, that witnesses be invited proportionately to each recognized party standing in the House, and that no such witness be invited without proper instruction of the committee. Chair, I have that motion that can be delivered to all members forthwith.
Thank you, Ms. Shanahan. Have you delivered it to the clerk in both official languages?
I believe so. Let me just check.
I'm just going to suspend. I'm just going to huddle with the clerk.
Not much I can do about how close she is to the
check,
camera.
please.
I can make it worse.
And I paused the time. Just 1 second,
we'll
Mr.
see if
Desjardins.
we can make it
Mr.
worse.
Desjardins, I assume you want to speak to this, Mr. Desjardins, or is it a point of order? Yeah, just give me a few minutes.
What's going
I guess
on?
it's a point of order in relation to just the supply of the motion.
It's a point of order.
How do you mean
I might have
by this?
missed
What do you mean by the supplies? And is it coming to you?
Like, did a clerk send us? Yeah.
No, I'm going to check right that. All I have
Oh,
is
I
Shanahan reading it. I'm just going to check right now with the clerk. 1 sec, please. Mr. Viersen, is that a point of order or just lining up?
Just on the motion.
Just 1 sec, please.
All right, not really sure what they're talking about in the background, but we'll hear immediately when they come back. So hopefully they're not going to break for too long, but it's pretty interesting today, at least. Again, Khalid is going to go off. She and Brock are in for one big battle here coming up towards the end. Barrett gets up there again, and it's just frigging interesting.
Ms. Shannon, I'm going to take this as you are
Here we go.
tabling this motion. It does not, I'll come back to you in a second. I will allow you to respond. It does not, it is in the broad category of committee business, which of course is acceptable, but not, does not pertain to the business at hand with this ongoing meeting. You are welcome to respond to that. We, of course, can pick it up. I am willing to. I am willing to seek additional time on Tuesday if you do. If you're in agreement, but you go ahead, please, Ms. Shanahan.
Chair, I am moving this motion.
So I'm going to move it out of order. It does not. I'll explain why. It does not. It does not pertain to the business at hand. It is a broad motion with respect to how this committee can operate, and of course we could pick it up next week. And as an alternative to members, I propose we finish off today's meeting with witnesses we have, and then we deal with this motion early next week. Ms. Shanahan, you still have two minutes.
I challenge that decision, Mr. Chair.
Very good. We'll have a vote then. Clerk, please call the roll call.
Shall the decision of the chair be sustained? Ms. Bradford.
I vote against.
Mr. Van Bynen.
I vote against.
Ms. Khalid.
I vote no.
Ms. Shanahan.
No.
Ms. Yip.
No.
Mr. Nader.
Yes.
Mr. Brock.
Yes.
Mr. Viersen.
Yes.
Madame Saint-Clair Desgagnés.
Oui.
Mr. Desjardins.
Against.
Five nays, 5 yeas.
Sorry, what was that again?
Five.
How did Mr. Desjardins vote?
Against.
Mr. Desjardins, can you just confirm your vote? Are you voting to uphold my ruling, or are you voting to have this motion accepted and we will move into debate on this motion?
I'll accept the motion.
So you are moving to debate this motion right now?
Against. Yeah.
Very good.
Exactly.
Very good. All right. The committee has overruled the chair, and we are going to debate this motion. Mr. Viersen,
What's up,
you're
Betty
up
Zoom?
first.
How are
It looks
you
like
today?
over to you, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair.
We're having some fun here watching some
I'm a relative
crazy
new member to this committee, and I do recall the name drop of Mr.
CBSA
Christopherson, of who I had the privilege of
corruption
serving on committee
involved with GC
within the
strategies and the
past
arrive
by
can scam app.
Ms. Shanahan.
It's fun.
And she laid out for me very early on in my time here at this committee that this committee generally operated on a consensus basis, and that it was she was the one that informed me that Mr. Christopherson had said that when this committee was working well, you couldn't tell which party the member was from, or whether the member was an opposition member or a government member. So I find it quite surprising that that this motion is coming from Ms. Shanahan in particular today, that demanding that there would be equal representation of witnesses and based on party allocation and things like that. So I'm surprised. I don't think that that is the spirit of this committee, and I would vote against this motion. So thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Mr. Desjardins, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And although you know that I
Appel au
appreciate...
règlement, Monsieur le Président.
On a point of order, Mr. Chairperson, just if you could hold on a second, Mr. Desjardins, there's a question, a point of order rather. We haven't received the motion in both official languages yet, so before we debate it, I'd like to get my hands on it.
Meeting until all members have the motion. It was sent to the clerk. I know the clerk is busy working on it. So, Mr. Desjardins, if you can just hold for a minute or two, I'll come right back, and I'm going to suspend this meeting. And I do have a list
Sure
of people that wish to speak to it after you, Mr. Desjardins. I've got Ms. Khalid and then Mr. Nader. But allow me to suspend. And as for witnesses, if you can just hang tight for a couple of minutes, we'll see how this goes. 1 second, please. And on that, I'll suspend.
Sorry, gang. Sorry, unattended for a moment. We'll be right back.
that this committee deals with.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Looking at the motion, I do believe that it's important, particularly for my party and our smaller representation in this committee, to be able to have input on our witness list and to be able to have consent, the standard of a convention of policies across most committees in the House of Commons. And so I think it's quite consistent with existing procedure. So I'd be happy to dispose of this as when you can in order for us to return to the witnesses. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Desjardins. Ms. Khalid, you have the floor.
Thanks very much, Chair, and very much like Mr. Desjardins, I really believe that it's imperative for us to have full sway and full consensus as we work on the important matters that this committee deals with. You know, over the past number of months that I've been part of this committee, I have had the privilege and the honor to work with all members, regardless of party, to come together to build that consensus, to find ways to move forward, to actually tackle the issues that public accounts is tasked with within our government, within our parliament. And time again, I have had to remind you, Chair, and remind committee members that that we are willing to play ball here. That can we please have say in when meetings are called, in just an understanding as to which the witnesses are. We are trying our very best to work with the committee to ensure that we are doing what taxpayers, what Canadians want us to do. And it is getting increasingly difficult for us on our side, and I won't speak to other members and other parties, but I know that for us, it's becoming more and more difficult for us to be able to have a say in when meetings are held, when we are in our constituents trying to do the important work for our constituents, which witnesses are called without having any regard what the rest of the committee wants, Chair. And so I think as much as I would not have wanted this motion to put forward, because I personally thought that this was a general understanding as to how we operate as a committee, it's sad that we have to put this motion forward, but I fully support it because that's the nature of how parliamentary committees work. That is how we should be able to operate with consensus, with ensuring that every party has representatives and an equal say in which witnesses are called, in when meetings are held. Trust me, Chair, it's not just you. We all care about what the issues are that are discussed in this committee, and we want to work with you, Chair. And so I'm really hoping that all members of this committee can support this motion.
Thank you so much,
because
Wayne.
it
That's
is important to how we function as a nonpartisan, multi-partisan committee that cares about the public and the issues that the public is interested in. So I'll stop there, Chair, and express my support for this motion.
Thank you very much, Ms. Khalid. Mr. Nader, you have the floor, please.
Thank
you,
you,
Chair.
Wayne.
I'll be
That's really
exceptionally
cool,
brief,
amazing.
so this can go to a vote. You know, Chair, I'm old enough to remember when parliamentary secretaries weren't supposed to be on committees. That was the Liberal platform promise, but here we are with the Liberal parliamentary secretary carrying water for the PMO and the Liberal National Caucus chair moving this motion. Obviously, they're not happy with the damning testimony they're hearing about incompetence and corruption within the government related to Arrive scam.
I would raise a point of order, Chair, but I think I'll let it pass.
But you didn't.
Obviously, there's no point of order because there is no point of order that Ms. Khalid can raise because obviously what they're doing is trying to disrupt the work of this committee and getting the bottom of Arrive scam. So I look forward to this motion being passed in every single Liberal-chaired committee as well. And it's unfortunate the Liberals don't have the dedication to log on to Zoom for 2 hours during a constituency week. I know here on the Conservative side we're ready to do the work on behalf of Canadians and get to the bottom, get answers on Arrive scam. That's my comments, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Nader. Madame Secrétaire d'État, s'il vous plaît.
Merci pour être pris.
Well, thank you. Just to clarify the wording of the motion, I take issue with point A of the motion. It states that there would be a deadline for a list of definitive witnesses. So who sets the deadline? I'd like Ms. Shanahan to explain that to me. And secondly, it means once the deadline is set, that no further witnesses can be added to the study, which would strike me as problematic, because as a study progresses, one is able to determine who the relevant witnesses might be to that specific study. And that's the case precisely with ArriveCAN. You know, we are finding, as we go along, that there are relevant witnesses that should appear. So I, you know, would like some kind of predictability about what's going to occur in the committee, but I don't think we should tie our hands right from the outset. It's not a good idea to do that at the beginning of the study, and I think we should have some level of flexibility in that regard.
Vinny?
Have you finished?
In the hand, do you like to that or?
Très brièvement.
Well, just very briefly, if I may. I think I said what I had to say at the start of the meeting. But, you know, the normal process at committee is that, you know, we call witnesses, but the normal process hasn't been followed here at the Public Accounts Committee. Under normal conditions, and this has been the long-term practice, that we invite, for example, the Auditor General with the officials from the department concerned, for example, regarding the Auditor General's report in this case. But as you can see, we've had 10 meetings on this particular topic of ArriveCAN. It's also being studied at other committees, and witnesses are being called to appear left, right and centre. So it's normal that there would be a process, a procedure that would be followed as far as our work is concerned, that in fact is in line with the wishes of all members of the committee. And it's my belief that well, it's okay that the chair set the date, but it should be in consultation with the members. That's the normal way of doing things.
Charity from the chair's perspective. On point 8, Ms. Shanahan, looking to set a deadline for witnesses with the explicit consent of the committee. Do you envision kind of a standard deadline that the committee will approve once, or is it meeting by meeting? And could you give me a sense of how many days you think is adequate? I'm curious to know. There's an issue with point B, of course, is that often for the bulk of our reports, there is no consultation on the, or rather, we're on autopilot when it comes to witnesses. We have the auditor and the subjects of the audits. So is this kind of, are you talking kind of extraordinary meetings? How do you propose that works given the typical work that this committee does? And no such witness be invited without instruction of the committee. So are you saying, does this kind of negate that they're proportional? Would the committee have to approve all witnesses, or if whatever ratio is agreed to, say 4-2 and 1-1, the witnesses can be invited, or do all witnesses have to be approved by the committee? And so giving some members the ability to veto witnesses that a party might want to hear from. Could you respond to those, please, to give the clerks some?
Chair, you're an experienced member, and I think and many of us have sat on other committees, so we know that when we are faced with a study where where the committee has already agreed that we're going to undertake that study, and we are inviting witnesses outside the normal scope of public accounts is a committee where we have sort of our guaranteed witnesses, which is the Auditor General and the officials of the department that are directly concerned. And so it is because it has come about in this session of Parliament that we are being confronted with the unilateral invitation of witnesses outside of our normal functioning. That we want to see. This motion speaks to the practice that other committees have, which is that there's consultation with the members, and that the chair proceeds in consultation with the members, with the added caveat that in public accounts, it's been the normal practice that this be done by consensus, but at least that we had that consultation done en bonne et due forme, as we say. So I think the motion is clear, and I, for one, am ready to vote on it.
Very good. Ms. Khalid, you have the floor. Then I'll have another question. Over to you, please.
Thanks very much, Chair. And I just wanted to add to everything that Ms. Shanahan has said, which I 100% agree with. There is no veto power, as is with all committees. Every party submits their witness list, and those witnesses are invited to come and appear before the committee. We're not talking about, whether a party can veto. This is not the United Nations Security Council. We are trying to be as inclusive as possible here. And so I don't anticipate any veto power. I think that members should be given the opportunity to be able to invite witnesses in a consensus format and to be able to have a heads up and to have some say and some consultation in when meetings are held. We all lead very, very busy lives within our constituencies, doing the important work for our constituents and in Parliament and with this committee as well. So we want to be able to build that consensus and to work together, Chair. This is really the purpose of the motion.
Thank you. Could I get a sense from you, Ms. Shanahan? How do you? I'm serious about this. How do you see this motion? So the subcommittee had a meeting and laid out priorities, and there was broad agreement there was broad opposition agreement to continue the ArriveCAN study. If this motion passes, do you see that this is immediate and tomorrow's meeting needs to be rescheduled, and we need to bring forward, and the same thing for next week, that we're going to put a freeze on the work that the clerk and the work the clerk has done to arrange it under my instructions based on what I had received coming out of the subcommittee meeting. Could you respond to those two, how you see this motion? Is this an immediate or a go forward?
This is a go forward, Chair, and I'm ready to vote on the motion. I think we all understand. I'm not going to prejudge what other members say. We're ready to vote.
All right. That's very, very helpful, Ms. Shanahan. Mr. Desjardins, you have the floor.
Thanks, John. Just to make greater clarity under aspect A, just hearing from my colleagues around the table about a witness list submission deadline set by the chair, which I agree with. I think you can determine, John, Mr. Chair, in my perspective, when that happens because of that portion there, just to answer that question in my perspective. I also think that when it says the explicit consent of the committee, I don't think it means the consensus of the committee. I think a consent happens largely by way of by a majority vote. And so I think a majority vote of the committee is the explicit consent that I understand point A to read.
Thank you. Anything else, Mr. Desjardins? Nope, that's helpful. Mr. Barrett, you have the floor.
Yeah, Chair, it's beyond parody that the Liberals want to be able to call rebuttal witnesses to the Auditor General of Canada. So we see that this is a Liberal cover-up. They're trying to cover up their $60 million arrive scam.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Let's go to a vote. If they're not comfortable with what's happening in their government.
I have a point of order, then I'll return the floor to you, Mr. Barrett. Yes, Ms. Khalid, you have the floor.
I find exception to us being blamed.
Ms. Khalid, that is a point of debate.
Witnesses.
I will give you the floor after Mr. Barrett is done, and you're welcome to have a rebuttal. Mr. Barrett, you have the floor again.
Yeah, Chair. The Liberals, including Ms. Khalid, should vote for their cover-up and to be able to bring rebuttal witnesses to the Auditor General when they don't like the news that's reported on in this massive corruption scandal. So I'd be interested to see who they'd bring out. I guess they'll bring Christian Firth as their expert witness to rebut the Auditor General. We believe Ms. Hogan. We understand they believe Mr. Firth. So let's have a vote.
Thank you. Ms. Yip, you have a point of order, or is it a point of debate? Because I do have Ms. Khalid on it. Thank you. Ms. Khalid, I've said I'd put you down. Do you have anything to add? All right. Seeing no other interveners, Clerk, could you please call the vote?
Shall the motion of Ms. Shanahan carry? Ms. Bradford?
In favor.
Mr. Van Bynen?
In favor.
Ms. Khalid?
Yes.
Ms. Shanahan?
Yes.
Ms. Yip?
Yes.
Mr. Nader?
No.
Mr. Brock?
No.
Mr. Viersen?
No.
Madame Saint-Claude Desgagnés?
Non.
Mr. Desjardins?
Yes.
6 yeas, 4 nays.
Very good. The motion is carried. I will, of course, follow it. Attorney General, we're going to finish up our rounds. I apologize for the delay to our witnesses. Ms. Shanahan, you have the floor for 2 minutes and about 10 seconds.
Point of order, Chair.
Just 1 second. Ms. Shanahan. Yes, Mr. Brock.
Given the unnecessary intervention that lasted close to 45 minutes, do we have resources beyond 12 o'clock?
Well, I am going to work on that right now, so I can get back to the committee. It, though, is my intention, though, to see us through, both finish this third round that we're just at the beginning, and then finish up the fourth round. So, Ms. Shannon, you have the floor for 2 minutes, 10 seconds, please.
Yes, well, thank you, Chair. And going back to Mr. Moore talking about the ArriveCAN application itself, is the ArriveCAN application, as we heard from the Auditor General, does have enduring value, and you mentioned it just before we move to the motion. Can you speak to what that means for the CBSA, the enduring value?
And I think, I think what I said to Ogo last week, I do believe the ArriveCAN application provided value for money, but I do also accept it didn't provide best value for the taxpayer. So when you're looking at value for money, you have to look at economy, efficiency and effectiveness. And the Auditor General has recognised that it was an effective app in order to provide FAC with information about quarantine on a timely basis to allow them to do their job. In terms of efficiency, I think I also have spoken about it cost about $1, the ArriveCAN app, whereas the paper-based process was costing about $3. So there's definitely a more efficient approach to the paper-based process. When we talk about economy, there is a judgment there. And we've talked previously about, differences in terms of what we count, in terms of the money. But I think we all agree that we know that there was not sufficient information to record all of the expenditures correctly. Some of that we are going to be dealing with, but also we recognise that we should have had an accounting code at the start.
Well, thank you for that, because I think that's important to note that the ArriveCAN project was conceived as something that would save money to the CBSA. So the fact that it didn't, though, and we were all shocked with the testimony of people like Mr. Yo to this committee, who was very proud to say that he was a conservative member, conservative donor, member of the People's Party of Canada, which means that he's not somebody that believes in tracking vaccination rates and so on. It was very bizarre, but he was very happy to make money on the ArriveCAN. What can you do to make sure that people like that don't get involved in projects again?
So I think it's very difficult for me to comment on that, because what we want to see in procurement is a fair, equal process, and everyone should be allowed to have the opportunity to compete fairly to actually drive value for money for the public service. So one of the issues for us is we did allow this to run too long. We did use the same contractors for too long, and I think that's one of our core lessons to be learnt. And and I fully support the approach of having open competition, fair, transparent competition to allow us all to get the best value for money.
Thank you very much. That is the time. Suivant, c'est Madame Cycle Degagné pour 2 minutes 30 secondes, s'il vous plaît.
Ms. Cycle Degagné, 2.5 minutes, please. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. I'd just like to jump on the last point you mentioned, Mr. Moore. You talked about value for money, efficiency. However, it started in 2010, we saw an explosion, 2015, 2018, and now in 2021, the CBSA awards about 20% of its contracts, or even a tad more, that are non-competitive. Now, do you consider that all these non-competitive contracts do provide value for money to taxpayers?
I think it's a complicated answer to a complicated question. So I think the principle set out in the directives is for always to have competition in all of our procurements. But sometimes, for the reasons of national security, that's not always possible. But also there are other good reasons in terms of things like intellectual property rights and elsewhere. So it depends on the contract.
D'accord. Et pour des raisons de sécurité nationale.
I see. And for national security reasons, we see that was the reason given during the pandemic. But in 2023, well, the pandemic is over. There's no emergency. So why award so many non-competitive contracts, even nowadays?
We have to look at these individually. So, for example, just recently, we have approved a national security exemption for biometric data capture. That's for security reasons. But what I'm pleased to say is, unlike what happened during COVID, we discussed that at the Procurement Review Committee twice before agreeing to that national security exemption, which we then sent over to PSPC. So we have greater oversight, greater governance on these decisions.
D'accord.
I see. But the fact remains we're talking about over 20%. That's huge. That's a gigantic number of contracts. We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars that are being awarded non-competitively. And you've singled out one single example on the basis of a national security exemption. You said that it's not always the case, but given that the pandemic is well and truly behind us, we're talking about a huge amount of money. We're talking about an exception here. That's the important thing to remember. There are procurement rules. There are supposed to be exceptions, of course. The problem is that when it's 1 out of every 4 or every 5 contracts, that's no longer exceptions. It becomes kind of par for the course that there would be non-competitive contracts awarded, and that is a problem in my eyes. And for a lot of people, moreover, it doesn't demonstrate that taxpayers are getting value for money, bang for their buck.
I certainly agree with you that non-competitive contracts do not always.
Allez-vous faire quelque chose à ce sujet? Allez-vous regarder plus?
Are you going to do something about it? Are you going to take a close look at this? Why there are so many non-competitive contracts awarded?
Well, we are looking at it through the Procurement Review Committee. So one of our first challenges for every single contract which we look at is, why is it going to be non-competitive? As I said before, for reasons of national security, that was acceptable. But I don't believe that the Procurement Review Committee would accept if there wasn't a very strong case.
Et voilà, merci beaucoup. Suivant, Mr. Desjardins, you have the floor for 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Moore, you mentioned at our last round of questioning that although everyone in your ministry is responsible for financial oversight and ensuring accountability or responsibility, you're accountable to ensuring, or we're accountable to ensuring, that some of this cost for dollar, but most particularly the transparency and accountability piece for the contracts, was met. And so what level of accountability have you faced in terms of what has taken place, and what changes will you make as you continue this work?
So I think, as I previously said, we have a very comprehensive procurement improvement plan, which we are now working through to ensure that we deliver those improvements. And
how does that hold you accountable?
Well, I am accountable for that procurement review plan. I established the Procurement Review Committee. I've overseen the procurement improvement plan over the last 9 months. I'm also looking very extensively.
But you can see, can you see the problem though, Mr. Moore? Like, having you do this work, particularly considering the fact that so much of this work was basic information that wasn't able to be found. it's a reasonable question to suggest that Canadians might not have trust in the internal systems that you're creating, considering that for the better period of a very long time in CBSA, that this information wasn't always up to par. And we see that for particularly the governance structure, for example. The governance structure was lacking between the Public Service Procurement Canada and even CBSA. We heard from Public Service Procurement Canada that they didn't know who was responsible at the time for what. And so it's likely to assume that if they didn't know that and they were your contracting partner, that your ministry also didn't know that. Is that correct?
No, I would say it's not correct. It was very clear who the technical authorities on all of those contracts were.
That's not what Procurement Service and Procurement Canada said, though. So who's right? Who we like to believe? the Public Service, Procurement Canada, or you?
I do not think we're disagreeing. I think it's clear what the responsibilities of the contract authority are and what the responsibilities are of the technical and project.
The Auditor General said in herself, in our examination of contracting practice, we saw little documentation to support how and why the Canada Border Service Agency initially awarded GC Strategies the ArriveCAN contract through non-competitive processes. Only one potential contractor submitted a proposal, and that proposal did not come from GC Strategies. Can you explain that?
Well, I think that is partly subject to the internal investigation review, which I can't comment on, because I do not know how that has progressed. But I think it's also a wider recommendation arising out of our action plan about knowledge management systems and how we record. As I said before, employees at all levels are responsible for documenting, but there's still a lot of work for us to do to ensure that's happening. That's why.
But how could you not be? How could you not see
I'm afraid
such
that
gross
is,
mismanagement?
Mr. Deja, that is your time. I'm afraid it is my intention to give you one more slot before we wrap up today. We're still working on that. Mr. Brock, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Moore, I am so grateful you're actually part of a panel with the Auditor General. In fact, you're sitting right next to Mr. Hayes, the Deputy Attorney General, Auditor General, I should say. Now, last week, about a week ago, exactly a week ago, I asked you a question. You couldn't answer the question. I want to know why you deliberately, your agency, the CBSA, not you personally, why the CBSA deliberately misled and lied to the Auditor General when saying that GC Strategies actually provided a proposal for the initial contract to work with the CBSA. That's what the CBSA confirmed to the Auditor General. The Auditor General confirmed that, in fact, that was false. So here's your opportunity to come clean to Canadians and to members of this committee. You, as a representative of the CBSA, why did you mislead the Auditor General?
So as a representative of the CBSA, I do not believe the CBSA did mislead the Auditor General. There were different choices at that time, and one of the choices was to have an in-house developed project using staff augmentation, which is the GC Strategies.
I'll stop you right there. Are you suggesting the Auditor General simply got it wrong? They looked for a proposal on the initial contract with CBSA that you said you had in your possession from GC Strategies, and they confirmed it wasn't there.
Well, I think what you're referring to is missing documentation, which I think has been subject to a number of different inquiries. Lots of different people have been looking for the documentation, and that is also part of the investigation to see whether the documentation is missing because of COVID or because of some
Okay,
other reason.
GC Strategy, specifically Mr. Firth, when he attended a few weeks ago, refused to answer questions regarding his involvement in the $25 million IT service contract, stating that responding to that question would somehow jeopardize the RCMP investigation. So, we know through the Auditor General's report that I'm sure that you have read that GC, Government of Canada Strategies, was directly involved in the drafting, the narrow terms of that $25 million IT service contract.
Point of order,
Just one
Chair.
second, Mr. Brock. Yes, Ms. Shanahan?
Yeah, it's just on this Government of Canada that Mr. Brock is referring to. Is this an official name? I'm just
That's not a
confused. It's
point.
GC Strategies.
Ms. Shanahan, that's
far as
not a point of order. If the witness is seeking clarity, they're entitled to ask, but not members. Mr. Brock, I don't know if you want to ask your question again. I'll give you time if you do. So
that's fine.
Please do.
For Ms. Shanahan's benefit, it was actually Mr. Firth himself who confirmed that the GC stands for Government of Canada. Not my words, your witness, Ms. Shanahan, Mr. Firth. So, Mr. Firth, through GC Strategies, created their own terms, drafted their own contract, which surprisingly they actually won. 25 million tax dollars, Canadian taxpayer dollars. Who at CBSA allowed that to happen?
Well, I think, as I've said previously, it is unacceptable for.
No, sir, I know it's unacceptable. Everyone knows it's unacceptable. You're the one responsible, you're accountable for this mess, you're accountable for failures. Now provide us some answers. Who at the CBSA, I want names and I want positions, allowed Government of Canada Strategies to draft their own contract worth 25 million taxpayer dollars? Name, sir.
Well, that is, as I've said before, it's the Border Technologies and Innovation Directorate which were responsible for that.
Give me a name. Not a department, give me a name.
Well, the DG is Mr. MacDonald, and the Executive Director was Mr. Utano. They were responsible for drafting the statement of...
Are you saying it was Mr. MacDonald and Mr. Utano who allowed GC Strategies to write their own contract? Is that your evidence?
I'm not saying that at all, but I'm saying that's what...
That's the question I'm putting to you, sir. How more
Point of
simpler
order,
can I
Mr.
phrase
Chair.
it? Who at
Point of order, Mr.
CBSA
Chair.
One
allowed
second,
this
Mr.
to
Brock.
happen?
I've taught Miss Khalid. What is your point of order?
With the years of experience we've had, we treat our witnesses with a little bit more respect than what Mr. Brock is treating our witnesses as right now.
That is not a point of order. Mr. Brock is trying to get an answer and is becoming, I think, rightly frustrated the way a lot of Canadians are. Mr. Brock, you
We
have
just
the
had
floor.
enough, everyone.
Mr. Moore, let's not
She's
play
fed up.
games.
She just wants
The
people to
question
be treated
is simple.
fairly.
Who, give me a name, at CBSA allowed
doesn't stand a
Government of
chance
Canada
against Brock.
Strategies to write their own contract, which they won, $25 million. Give me names, please.
Well, I think as I've already given you names, but they're...
And I asked you, you gave me names, you gave me Mr. MacDonald, Mr. Utano. I asked you, are they responsible for allowing GC to write the contract? You said no. So the question now is, sir, who at CBSA allowed it?
I said I do not know because it is under investigation, and that is a key part of investigation internally.
How could you not know?
Point of order
How could you
again,
not
Mr.
know,
Chair.
sir?
Just 1 second, Mr. Brock. Yes, Miss Khalid.
Working overtime.
This is a point of order on decorum. The witness has said time and time again he does not know there's ongoing investigations. Why are we badgering a witness?
Again, that is not a
Please,
point of
Chair.
order, Chair.
That is absolutely
That
a
is
point of
not a
order,
point
Chair.
I
This
thought-
is about decorum.
Miss Khalid, Mr. Brock's question was simple. Why don't you know? That's what that was his question. It seems to be a
Chair,
valid question. You might not like how it's
you
posed.
became. I'm so sorry, Chair. I didn't know you became an agent for the Conservatives
Wow.
there. But
He's a Conservative
I'm asking you
MP,
to
but-
be fair, he's also the chair of this committee.
Oh,
which
gosh.
begs of him to be nonpartisan in his deliberations in
doesn't.
how we
No, it
operate as a
doesn't.
committee. Yes, it does.
Yes, Ms. Khalid,
Yes, it
and I'll
does.
point out I've had my share of Conservative MPs who have whinged at some of the decisions I've made as well. So
And
when I get it
Chair,
from both
I
sides,
am
I find
quite
myself
tired of
right in the
this
position I need to be.
unparliamentary
Miss
behavior.
Khalid, Mr. Brock has the floor. His question was, why don't you know? That question is in order. Mr. Brock, you have about 40 seconds left.
So you can ask for 6 minutes the same question.
Okay, hold on. Miss Khalid, the more you talk, the more time, I'm going to start, the more you talk, the more time Mr. Brock has, because you're running into his time to get questions going back and forth. So, Mr. Brock, you have the floor for 40 seconds.
Thank you, Chair, and I won't be silenced by Ms. Khalid or Ms. Shanahan or anyone on that Liberal bench, because these are relevant questions that Canadians want to know an answer to. So I'll ask it again for the 5th time, sir. Why do you not know who in particular allowed GC to write the terms of their own contract, given your position at the CBSA? And the question can go to Mr. Vleming as well. Why do you not know?
So actually, Mr. Hayes has helped me with the chronology in that Mr. MacDonald actually left the CBSA on the 23rd of April 2021, and the first competitive contract awarded to GC Strategies was on the 16th of May 2022. It is still subject to review of the independent of the investigations. Once that has
The investigation run by Mr. LaFleur.
Mr. Brock, your time is up.
And the
I'm
RCMP
afraid
also
I will
looking at this issue.
I will come back to your bench. Ms. Khalid, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. And to our witnesses, what steps have you taken to ensure that this does not happen again? And, you know, I think Canadians, all parliaments, members of parliament realize that this is not something that should have happened at all. So can you just outline for us what steps you've taken to make sure that this does not happen again?
Thanks so much for the question. And I think, you know, I just want to reiterate, I am very disappointed this has happened. I think there is the fact that the COVID pandemic was ongoing at the time, and so therefore some of our internal controls were not operating as effective as it could be. What I've said before, the first line of defense, what we are doing is all 900 people with delegation of financial signing authorities have been retrained. That's 16.5 hours of training everyone has been undertaken to remind them of what their responsibilities are in terms of contracting. In addition, we have strengthened the conflicts of interest. The conflicts of interest register covers employment, which was actually something that Mr. Vleeming was talking about a minute ago, but it also covers procurement. And we have now identified that anyone who has an interaction with procurement must talk to the procurement directorate and must log that as a conflict of interest, a potential conflict of interest. We've also strengthened the second line of defence as well, in terms of creating the Procurement Review Committee, which is looking at all contracts and all TAs above $40,000. So we have done a lot already, but we have more to be done in order to identify and address each of the recommendations which have been made.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. And was there political oversight in all of this, the ArriveCAN app and its procurement and additional contracts, etc.? Was there political oversight over any of this within your purview?
So I'm not in a position to talk about any of the president talking or informing the minister. What I have I'm in a position to say was there was funding allocated in the second year, 21-22. That would have gone through supplementary estimates. And in the third year, there was funding granted in budget 2022, and that would also have gone through estimates and main estimates. So that's the only political oversight which I was personally involved in.
And those supplementary estimates are not specific to projects. They are general funding for departments, correct?
Is the allocation of funding which has been received during the year and been approved by Treasury Board.
Right. And then after the fact, individual bureaucrats, et cetera, whoever has whatever the right to sign off on whatever contract, delegation, et cetera, they then make those decisions. Is that correct?
Absolutely. In line with the delegation of financial signing authorities, which is approved by the minister when they take up their position.
And when the minister approves delegation of authority, I'm sure that they expect that that our bureaucracy and public service have done their due diligence of putting forward a candidate who is going to receive that due diligence, correct?
Absolutely, and that's why we do the training, and that's why we have asked people to redo the training to remind them what their responsibilities are.
So I know I asked you this before. Training clearly didn't work in this instance where many millions of dollars of taxpayers was spent on something that, you know, arguably could have been done for a lot cheaper. So in terms of lessons learned, do you think that there should be more ministerial oversight in how money is spent by public service in acquiring goods and services that Canadians need?
I don't think I can really answer that question. I think that's a question for the minister. But when they set the departmental financial signing authorities, they do have the ability to actually set it tighter, which would mean that decisions would have to come to the minister for approval.
Okay, thank you very much. Those are all the questions I have.
Thank you very much. Turning now to Mr. Barrett, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please. And this is our last round, and I do have resources for a full round. So, Mr. Barrett, you have the floor for 5.
So, Mr. Moore, it's going to be incredible, if not impossible, for Canadians to believe that CBSA has no idea who authorized GC Strategies to ink the requirements for a $25 million contract and then get awarded that same contract, and nobody knows. Nobody knows, and you offered some names. Then, when pressed by Mr. Brock on if those names were those responsible, you said, "Well, no, that's not what I'm saying." But you're not able or willing to tell us who. And then Mr. Hayes tells you that one of those individuals wasn't even there. So it's hard to believe. So, in any other business, in any other environment, there would be serious repercussions. You said, sir, on ArriveCan that you are, quote, you said, "I'm accountable for failures," end quote. These are massive failures, the likes of which have not been seen in decades in this country. Have you offered to resign?
Offered to resign because I'm actually very proud of what we've achieved over the last 6 years.
That's shameful. There's nothing to be proud of in this. And I would, if I had time, I'd dig into the supposed cost savings. But the paper-based applications, those were human costs.
Point of order, Chair.
Yes, Ms. Shanahan, point of order, please.
Again, the shameful treatment of our witnesses who are
She's using the same word I used.
Actually, it is the decorum in committee. It is Standing Order 117.
So she's calling it shameful,
and Chair,
but I said shameful?
call upon you to ensure the respectful treatment of
she's using the same word,
the
John.
witnesses that appear before us today. And
so, Ms. Shanahan, your point of order is that you're entitled to call a member shameful as actions, but the member cannot refer to the statements from a witness as shameful?
I am saying that the words that the member
You used the same word, Brenda.
With the witness, it's in questioning a witness, is not appropriate. It is inappropriate to this committee.
Your cover-up is inappropriate.
Ms.
Call
Shanahan.
a civil servant to call upon a civil servant to resign, and then to say that is shameful. That is not worthy of this committee. We are here to ensure the accountability of civil servants, and we take that work very
Miss Shanahan, okay.
I'm having a tough time watching, guys.
You know, it is my practice both to give members latitude to ask their questions, and I think
it's a woman, so I respect
more unique
that,
for this
but she
committee
needs
to allow witnesses to respond fully, and
been watching
I
the
seldom
same
cut
amount of
them
time
off.
as you. I find it frustrating.
Because I think it is a benefit for this committee to hear answers. But Ms. Shanahan, one of the issues before this committee is the lack of answers that have come from the Government of Canada about who is responsible. I am tired of hearing that this is, we will fix it next time, when this is about the auditor's report, finding out what happened. You might not like the tone that Mr. Barrett is using, but it is entirely appropriate. And I suspect a good part of the country agrees. Now, don't bring me into this debate with these frivolous points of order on tone, particularly when you take issue with the word Mr. Barrett used, and then use it yourself to describe his actions, thereby reinforcing the point it is accurate. Mr. Barrett, you have the floor.
Chair?
Is it a point of order, Ms. Killian?
Yes, Chair. Again, on the same point of order on decorum, I would appreciate if the chair, I'm talking about a different person now, if the chair himself could be a little bit more nonpartisan in how he conducts
Okay, Ms. Killian, don't bring me into your bun fights, and I will be nonpartisan and conduct the meeting. You're going to continue to disrupt opposition members from asking questions, then I will get involved and make a ruling, as is my job. I'm not just a potted plant up here that's going to watch the clock. But as you get more political and try to cut opposition members from asking legitimate committee questions, I will reinforce their rights as members to ask it. Mr. Barrett, you have the floor for 3 minutes, 40 seconds, please.
My colleague Eric Duncan asked you last week, Mr. Moore, which CBSA executives involved in ArriveCan receive performance bonuses, and you said, quote, "I can't confirm if they received bonuses this year because the year is not actually at an end," end quote. Well, year end has come and gone. Which executives and how much?
So I'm not able to answer that question because I'm not responsible for executives' performance bonuses.
Well, that wasn't your answer last week, sir. You said that you weren't able to provide the answer because the year end hadn't come, not that you weren't responsible for it. So let me ask you a question with precision that you will be able to answer. Did you, sir, receive bonuses for your work?
I think, as I said last week, I did receive some performance pay during the periods when while I've been the CFO. But also I want to come back to your previous question, actually, with respect.
So $60 million in $60 million in waste, along with
sorry,
allegations
Mr. Chair, would I be allowed to
of
come back to the
fraud,
previous
forgery, and corruption, and this Arrive scam sees executives like yourself taking bonuses. You said, and I quote, "I'm accountable for failures," end quote. You said that today. Where is the accountability? So everyone keeps their job, everyone gets a bonus, and Canadians are on the hook for all of it, for tens of millions of dollars. And the supposed cost savings of paper versus this application, well, those paper costs were human costs. All of those humans are still being paid. These were costs on top of it. And so much of it, tens of millions of dollars of it, are grift, are just liberal insiders getting rich while Canadians get hammered and have to pick up the bill. And so it's egregious. It's egregious is what it is. I have a question for the Deputy Auditor General. In your report on page 5, there's a table. It's Exhibit 1.1, estimated costs of the main contractors on the ArriveCAN application at 31 March 2023. Of course, this details the $19.1 million that GC Strategies received that, of course, they deny getting paid. And of course, CBSA has no concept on how any of the contracts awarded to these two grifters were awarded. But at the bottom of that table, there's a line, Other, and it's $6.1 million. Obviously, the big numbers draw a lot of attention, that $19 million. But this $6.1 million. So Canadians are now wondering how much of this corruption exists in the system and what makes up these companies. Are there numbered companies involved? Because we need to understand who it is that's getting rich off of this project that, of course, Border Service officers said was absolutely ineffective and prevented them from fulfilling their responsibilities. And we've heard that from their union representatives and directly from BSOs themselves. So that's $6.1 million. Who makes up that list?
So we didn't include the details in our report. All of those companies, contractors, received less than $1 million. That was the cutoff that we used for the table. As we said in the footnotes to the table, there were 21 contractors. We haven't notified those contractors of the fact that we would name them in the report. We didn't name them, but there were 21. So we're talking from the low dollar values up to at the high end, possibly $1 million.
Are you able to furnish the committee with a list of those contractors?
We do have a list of those names, and we can provide it to the committee.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate the work of the Auditor General's office.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. That is your time. Ms. Shipp, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you. Mr. Moore, you weren't given an opportunity to finish answering Mr. Barrett's question. Would you like to take this opportunity to provide an answer?
Yes, thank you very much. And I think, as I've said before, it would be totally unacceptable for a contractor to be involved in drafting up a request for proposals for a contract which they then bid for. And under the procurement rules, you can use a contractor for technical reasons, but they then have to exclude themselves from making a bid for that contract, and it has to be disclosed. So if wrongdoing is found, and my answer to the question is I do not know, because I have not been involved in any of those internal investigations, and I'm certainly not involved in the RCMP investigation. If wrongdoing is found in any case of any of these contracting approaches, then action will be taken. That's what I'm assuring. But I can't say at this moment a name because I do not know a name. What Mr. Hayes did help me with was just to remind me of the chronology around who was involved in the Board of Technologies and Innovation Directorate, and I do accept that chronology. So I apologise to Mr. MacDonald by mentioning him when clearly he was not there at that time.
So you have not been approached by the RCMP?
I have not been approached by the RCMP at all.
Is there anything you can tell us about the progress of the ongoing internal reviews at the CBSA?
So what I can say is normally our service level indicator is to do a complex review within 120 working days. This review started in November of 2022 following the Butler allegations. A discussion was held in December 2022 with the RCMP, and the RCMP felt that by interviewing witnesses it could impact their own investigation, and they therefore asked for CBSA not to step down their investigation, but not to pursue all avenues. In October of 2023, the RCMP informed the CBSA that those investigations could now continue, and the CBSA internal investigations proceeded. And it came up with a preliminary statement of facts, which I am not aware of. I've not seen that, but my understanding is that was shared with the OGO committee.
Do you believe that there are any changes needed to be made to the code of conduct for CBSA employees?
So I think we will always looking at how we need to modernize and improve the code of conduct. There is a review being undertaken at the moment around the code of conduct, and the aim is always to make sure that is relevant. You know, for example, as social media changes, then adjustments need to be made to the code of conduct.
Do you think that the CBA has done enough to ensure that appropriate oversight is being taken in terms of managing relationships between employees and prospective contractors?
Well, I think, as I said, the Procurement Improvement Plan, which I've been working very hard on over the last 9 months, has taken a number of actions to do that in that respect, in particular around the conflicts of interest, and in particular around the disclosure of relationships or with any interactions with vendors or potential vendors.
Is there anything else you would like the committee and Canadians to know?
I think I come back to, you know, my belief is ArriveCan did provide value for money, but it didn't provide the best value for money. I know that is not necessarily everyone agrees with that approach, but we had to do this at a time of a national emergency. We had to get the paper-based system out of the approach and get it into digital system. That was done within 6 weeks. And it was very important for our officers not to fear touching pieces of paper from people crossing the border. So I think that's a really important sort of thing to recognise, that we did not do everything right in the ArriveCan. We recognise that. We recognise and we accept the recommendations made, and we're doing something about that. But overall, we did a very difficult job in very difficult times, and I'm proud of what we did. But we did make some mistakes, and we will learn from those mistakes.
Thank you.
That's it, Monsieur. Thank you very much. Suivant, c'est Madame Sigla Desgagnés.
Ms. Desgagnés, 2.5 minutes, please. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. I'd like to come back to some questions I'd asked of Mr. Wieming earlier. So you confirmed that the company that you worked for was hacked. Indeed, when you were Chief Information Officer of ORR Cannabis, and I quote an article from Yahoo Finance which states, digital and computer hackers stole all the data that OR Cannabis possessed, including passports, driver's license, and other highly confidential documentation. And when they tried to sell that data on Marketplace, as evidence of those documents, they sent out publicly a copy of your own passport, sir. Now, what was your experience as Chief Information Officer? Were you a victim of blackmail personally, or was OR Cannabis a victim of blackmailing after this data breach?
So the data breach actually got a very small amount of data from Aurora, and we were subject to blackmail. They did try to basically force us to pay to not release it, but the amount of information that they stole was extremely limited, and so we made a decision as an organization not to pay.
D'accord. Et
I see. Now, did that create upheaval in your personal career? In all likelihood, it was your responsibility to guarantee the company's cybersecurity. The buck stopped with you. Now, you learned of this extremely serious event, and yet you're supposed to protect at the CBSA Canadians and Quebecers' personal data, aren't you?
So it didn't. The reality is anybody can just read any of the news, and cyber attacks are increasing. As we've seen in the Government of Canada in the last year that I've been here, there've been a number of cyber attacks that have disrupted services. Every organization is under attack. The vast majority of organizations have had successful attacks, so it's not uncommon at all. The thing that worked really well when I was at Aurora was because of the design of our cybersecurity. When the hacker was able to get in, they were only able to get a very small amount of data, so our protection actually worked very well. A cyber attack that's successful is never ideal, but every CIO is prepared for that.
Donc vous jugez que vous aviez été préparé et pourtant...
So in your opinion, you were well prepared, and yet the hackers managed to get their hands on highly confidential data such as copies of passports, driver's license, and so on and so forth, correct?
You're never as prepared as you could be, but the reality is that cyber attacks continue to increase worldwide. You just have to Google the number of companies on a daily basis that do get hacked. And so it is expected, and what you have to do is limit the damage, and in this case, the damage was extremely minimal.
Et voilà, merci beaucoup. Suivant, next, Mr. Desjardins, you have the floor for 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I do want to now ask the Auditor General of their findings, or the Deputy Auditor General, sorry, of their findings on page 15, which reads as a subtitle, No Governance Structure or Budget. It goes on to read that the Auditor General's office found between April 2020 and July of 2021 that when the ArriveCAN application was being developed and regularly updated, no formal agreement existed between the Public Health Agency of Canada and the Canada Border Service Agency on their respective roles and responsibilities. It goes on to say the final sentence, in our view, the Public Health Agency of Canada, as the business owner, was responsible for the establishment of the governance structure. It later on says that a letter of intent between the agencies was signed on July 2020 and enforced till March 2022. To Mr. Hayes, that finding, what evidence did your office review that suggested there was that there was no governance structure that was adhered to?
As mentioned in the report, we expected that the Public Health Agency of Canada, as the business owner, would have established the governance structure. They would have clearly outlined the roles and responsibilities expected of their officials and the CBSA. We would have expected a budget at the very least, and some objectives, cost estimates, assessment of resource needs, and other risk management activities, and those were simply not in place. Quite frankly, without a budget, it's difficult to monitor costs and to identify when costs are rising outside of the acceptable range. So I guess I would say, as the Auditor General has mentioned, it was disappointing with what we did not find in this report.
And to Mr. Moore, to your knowledge, why wasn't this information, something as basic as a budget, supplied on behalf of CBSA?
Well, I think as Mr. Hayes, there was no memorandum of understanding between the Public Health Agency, who were responsible for the public health version of ArriveCAN.
What about the governance structure that you're a part of? You just mentioned that in my previous question that there was a governance structure and that you're adamant that this governance structure was put in place, but we see that there wasn't one and there was largely failures with what existed after that. So what knowledge do you have of the governance structure, and why wasn't the question raised about a budget?
So there was an emergency management governance structure, which was an operational environment, and there were regular, I would say daily meetings between FAC and CBSA and others in order to be able to make the adjustments to ArriveCAN in line with the orders in council. But it was disappointing that no funding was provided and therefore no budget was set. And it was also disappointing that if a budget had been set and we had received funding, it would have been then treated more like a project, which we would have brought in the governance structures. But I think, as Mr. Hayes said, that was the responsibility of the Public Health Agency of Canada.
Thank you very much. That is the time. Just so our witnesses know, we have two more questioners, one from the official opposition, and then the government members will round it out for us today. Mr. Nader, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and again, thank you to our witnesses. Mr. Moore, could you confirm for us how many employees of CBSA are currently actively engaged in outside employment or contracting?
Cannot confirm that number, but I can ask the CBSA to come back to you with a number because that would be the Human Resources branch.
So you're telling me you came to this committee meeting unprepared to answer that question, given the fact that this has been a topic of discussion for some weeks?
My understanding is that there has been a question raised and they will be giving a response. They are now doing a check of everybody to make sure that they have the full disclosure before they come up with a definitive number.
Are you personally aware of any employees within CBSA who have outside employment or outside contracts?
So I personally was involved in the conflicts of interest discussion last year for one of my employees who was proposing to take on an unpaid role, and actually we perceived that to be a conflict of interest, and it went through the standard process. So the evidence was gathered by our Human Resources branch. We discussed the process with the individual concerned, and actually the decision was that they decided to withdraw from that because there was at least a perceived conflict of interest. So I am aware of the process which is being operated, but it's operated by our Human Resources branch.
On the other side, are you aware of any contracts currently at CBSA which involve employees from other government departments?
So we, as a result of the investigations which are ongoing, we have done some searches of GEDS. We have identified some individuals who are in GEDS, which would, if you're in GEDS, it implies you're an employee of another government department. And we have therefore contacted those departments and worked through each of those individuals. I think it was around about 6 or 7 individuals, and the Director General responsible for that has confirmed with the other government department that there was no conflict in those cases. However, that work is ongoing.
So I just want to stop you for a second. You say there was no conflict, but they are in fact government employees who have contracts with CBSA. Is that correct? Can you confirm that there are government employees, public servants, at other departments who currently have active contracts with the Canada Border Services Agency? Are you confirming that, yes or no?
So I cannot confirm that, but we can get back to you with the details of that individual.
Sir, I'm going to stop you right there. You said that they were checked in GEDS, they confirmed with the departments and the Director General that they were in fact employees of those departments. You said 6 or 7 of them, but now you're unwilling to confirm that?
No, what I'm saying is 6 or 7 were checked, but I do know for a fact that some of those were inappropriately on GEDS. They had actually resigned and moved elsewhere.
So and again, of those 6 or 7, how many of them are Government of Canada employees with contracts at CBSA?
So I do not have that details, but I can...
Sir, you just said there were 6 or 7. It's a small number. And you tell me you can't confirm one way or the other?
I can't confirm because it wasn't in my area, but we can...
Sir, you are the Chief Financial Officer of the CBSA. You came here knowing that this would be a topic of discussion. You're unable to tell us this information. Yet you seem to have this information of the process that happened. You seem to have the information that these checks were done, but you can't tell us what actually happened?
I'm willing to come back to you on the level of details for these individuals.
Okay, sir, obviously there's been a process undertaken. This information is obviously at hand. Can you confirm and provide that information to this committee by the close of business today?
I'll have to go back to the department to see if I have it.
Could you make the endeavor that you'll try to do that by close of business today?
Go back to the department and talk to the DG who was responsible for this.
Your non-answers are frankly surprising.
Let me just interject, Mr. Nader. I appreciate the information will be forthcoming as soon as possible. Mr. Nader, the committee does allow for some time. I appreciate your determination to get to the bottom of this, but Mr. Moore, if you're able to, that's wonderful. But as soon as possible, and we will reach out at some point. Mr. Nader, back to you for a minute.
Because there may also be some privacy impact, which I can't comment on.
Again, privacy is not an issue. As you well know, sir, this Parliament and this committee can compel information from witnesses at any degree, and privacy and any of those issues are not impediments to providing information. This committee, and you as a senior public servant, ought to know the powers of committees to call for information and documents. On a different matter, 3 information technology contractors were found to have fraudulently billed for contract work with several departments between 2018 and 2022. These payments were estimated to be nearly $5 million. You were asked this question by my colleague, Mr. Brock, in a previous committee. Can you now confirm whether any of those firms did work with the Canada Border Services Agency?
So as I said at the previous committee appearance, the Public Services and Procurement Canada informed us that the CBSA was involved, and the involvement were estimated up to $15,000. They have not come back and given us the details yet.
When do you expect that information to be forthcoming?
I'll have to go back to PSPC and ask them.
So the exact same answer you basically gave a week and a half ago.
Well, I think we have had the Easter period in between.
Yes, we did have two days there that were
10 seconds, Mr.
statutory holidays. Chair, I will just conclude by saying I look forward to that information on double dipping coming to this committee as expeditiously as possible, because it is a concern for many Canadians.
Mr. Nader. Our last member, Ms. Shanahan, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Well, thank you very much, Chair. And I just want to say again how much I appreciate the witnesses being here today and making themselves available to us. In my last line of questioning, we established that indeed there is enduring value to ArriveCAN, that the original purpose was to offset the paper-based costs of dealing with people filling out forms and so on, and I can just imagine the inefficiency of that system. What I'd like to know now, though, is what went wrong with the procurement of the ArriveCAN app. Mr. Moore, you're familiar with the procurement ombudsman or ombuds who wrote a detailed report regarding the procurement of ArriveCAN?
Yes, absolutely. And I really welcome the Procurement Ombuds report and also the OAG's report. We have learnt an awful lot around the procurement. And I have said before, we definitely have made mistakes on procurement, and we've learnt those lessons. And I think the Controller General at a recent committee appearance said, now is the time to move on and actually make sure that these recommendations are implemented, and the organisation has the time to implement the recommendations and ensure this does not happen again. But I would also say that we should always go back sort of 4 years and think about the atmosphere of the pandemic. It was a very difficult atmosphere. Personally, I had to have a letter from the CBSA president to attend the office during that period, even though I was operating at an operational level. We had all of the relocation of all of the individuals back to their home environment, which they had never worked at before. We had the border, which was being significantly challenged. I think people do need to have a look at the context around this period of time. And the Auditor General did recognise the context at this time. I accept we made mistakes. We have learnt from those mistakes. We're implementing the actions from those mistakes. But we also do need to recognise that some of those mistakes may well have occurred because of the pandemic conditions. But also, we're looking to see if there's any wrongdoing. And if there is any wrongdoing, I can guarantee you action will be taken. But we really need to allow the RCMP and the internal investigation to conclude and find out whether any of these accusations are founded or not. If they are founded, action will be addressed.
Well, thank you for that. And I would go a step further and say that, of course, during the height of the pandemic emergency, when we did not even know the nature of COVID-19 and whether we could have a vaccine, what kind of protection that we could have in order to just simply continue as a society from day to day. But there were those who took advantage of that emergency situation, right? The fact that people were working from home, the fact that their services were needed. When we talk about staff augmentation, we needed specialized services to provide that digitized application. So I'm thinking of the Ombuds recommendation 3 concerning that the replacement of specific individuals clause in contracting, because the procurement ombuds was very clear about a bait and switch strategy that was used by contractors taking advantage of the situation, the emergency situation at the time. Can you comment on that?
So I think there is a risk that some contractors took advantage of that. But I also think that clause is different for different purposes. So for a staff augmentation contract, it is highly likely that an individual will not be available at the time that the contractor is required. I think it is different when we're talking about a supply arrangement where there's a defined product, and in that case, we would expect the people who have been put into the RFP to be attending and doing the work. So I think there are just different types of contracting and different explanations around that.
And regarding some of these preferred contractors who were not only involved in putting the criteria for which they would then bid on the contract, they were also using subcontractors. I'm thinking of Dalian, Mr. David Yeo, who told this committee that he was very happy to provide the service of access to government contracts because he was Indigenous and they were able to access the Indigenous set-aside that all government agencies have. What would you comment on that?
So I think that is subject to review by the it's CERNA, I think it's CERNA, and I don't think that's right. I think if you're there to actually provide opportunities for Indigenous people, they should be provided. My understanding under those contracts, 33% of the total contract value needs to be provided by Indigenous people, and I would look to CERNA to make sure that's happening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I just have a question for the chair. Now, we asked for Mr. Yeo to provide his conservative donor card documents to this committee. Have we received them yet?
I don't know. You're welcome to send a note to the clerk and find out what information Mr. Yeo has provided. Ms. Shannon, you seem intent on this card. I will remind you and all members watching, all of the audience watching, that those cards are sent out even before people donate. So I wouldn't read too much into it. But we will, of course, endeavor to follow up with all documents that are promised to this committee and report that information to committee members. Thank you to members of the Office of the Auditor General for coming today, along with members of Canadian Border and Services Agency. We appreciate you being here. I also appreciate your patience with us. I know we've run a little bit over, but I thank you for your time today. Just to kind of wrap up things, a working calendar was sent out to members this morning. Just a note, working with Ms. Yip, and well, actually all members of the subcommittee, but we're going to factor in some time at the end of the meeting Tuesday to review the subcommittee's work to date. As well, next point, I had previously requested witnesses for the ArriveCAN study. I neglected to put a date on that. I will do so right now, and the clerk will send it out again today for 1 week from today for any witnesses that members might want to have for the ArriveCAN study. Look, I'm just going to, of course, it is my intention to abide by every motion that is passed by this committee, and the motion that was passed today, I see no issue with that. It's just going to mean working through and communicating clear with deadlines. I'm also going to refer you all to the House Commons Procedure and Practices, Chapter 20, regarding the convening of meetings. I don't want today's motion to be misunderstood. That Chapter 20 states, meetings are called through decision of the chair or through the chair's authority, which is demonstrated across the parliamentary precinct. So I, of course, look forward to working with all members as we continue to study the ArriveCAN and as we agree together on witnesses going forward. We'll see you all back here tomorrow, and without further ado, I will adjourn this meeting. Thank you.
I guess so. We're done with that. So what are we going to jump into next? People like watching Brock, right? Like, Brock has an engaging personality, and he's really sharp and smarter than the average person, for sure. Let's look at a bit more Brock. It's just going to take me a second to call it up My computer, I have an old computer, so this stuff we're doing live broadcasts on, poor computer works pretty hard. So, yeah, here we go. This is an old story that I did. Everybody, what's up? Just Ehren right here, question period, Canada. How do you feel about Trudeau? Not very good, right? How do you feel about Trudeau taking $84,000 gift vacations and not declaring it to Canadians? Everybody, what's up? Just Ehren right here, question period, Canada. How do you feel about Trudeau? Not very good, right? How do you feel about Trudeau taking $84,000 gift vacations and not declaring it to Canadians? Just riding the track. I'm fed up with it. This guy's gotta go. You guys know Larry Brock. He's the kingpin. An MP from Ontario, used to be a big shot lawyer. He doesn't like Trudeau's actions either and is fed up with these vacations and hiding behind the curtain. Trudeau has to go. Larry Brock is going to explain right here the issues that he has with Trudeau recently. It's very interesting. Larry Brock is the kingpin. Trudeau better stay on the right side of the kingpin. He's not going to let this stuff go. This terrible behavior, poor choice making, just not helping Canadians. Enough is enough. Brock is going to explain why Trudeau has to go.
Damn off after that. Go ahead, Mr. Brock.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to start at the outset by wishing all my colleagues a Happy New Year. I hope that everyone had an enjoyable, relaxing time away from the Hill. A few of us, unfortunately, are back earlier than we anticipated, but this is an important issue, not only for parliamentarians, but it's an important issue for Canadians. As my colleague, Mr. Barrett, has indicated, 2024 has not started off on a new footing. It's essentially the same sort of issues that Canadians are dealing with in 2023 and 2022, and that's the issue of affordability. I know personally many members of my constituency who wrote to me and expressed their astonishment that how tone deaf this Prime Minister and this Liberal government was in light of all of the issues that Canadians are facing, that he would find it appropriate to accept an $84,000 gift for an extremely extravagant holiday in Jamaica. I think we are all of the same belief, and I believe all Canadians are of the same belief, Mr. Chair, that the Prime Minister is indeed worthy of a vacation. He is indeed worthy of spending quality time with his family. He was born of privilege. He maintains a lifestyle of privilege. It's now no shock to anyone here at this committee or in this House or across Canada that he is well connected with terms of friends and other associates around the world, and he probably enjoys staying at locations that offer some of the finer things in life. We don't begrudge that as a starting point. What we do begrudge is how a particular issue such as this has blown up to such an extent that it now has the makings of a scandal. This was a really non-issue from the get-go. If the Prime Minister and his office were completely transparent as to who sourced this particular vacation, how it was communicated to the Prime Minister, all the terms associated with he accepting the offer to stay at this luxurious villa, had he been upfront with Parliament, had he been upfront with Canadians right from the outset, I don't think we'd be here today. But the Prime Minister and his office have compounded this particular issue as such that we as parliamentarians are here asking for clarification. And you know, Mr. Chair, this isn't a one-off. This is a pattern of conduct with this Prime Minister and his office to mislead Canadians. Setting aside the controversy surrounding his trip to the Aga Khan Island and how he was found guilty of of breaching the ethic guidelines. He promised Canadians in the House that he would do better, that he would communicate in advance with the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner and be upfront. Because the hallmark of the Trudeau brand, the hallmark of the Trudeau government, is transparency. That's what he promised Canadians during the 2015 general election. You vote for me, you will have the most open, transparent, and accountable government this country has ever seen. Has that happened, Mr. Chair? Absolutely not. I really don't know if anyone on the Liberal bench, and certainly the Prime Minister, even understand the definition of transparency. But most recently, the government has shuffled some positions. One of the shuffling of positions was the House Leader, the government House Leader, who is now occupying that position by the name of Steve McKinnon. Steve McKinnon was asked by the press with respect to this vacation. He indicated as follows. The Prime Minister, and this is a quote, the Prime Minister followed all the rules and in fact got his travel plans pre-approved by the Commissioner. We know that's a lie. It's misleading. It was deliberate. It was intentional on Mr. McKinnon's part to mislead Canadians. Because now we know that that office, the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner, does not pre-approve and give permission to vacation. The issue is whether or not the form of a gift qualifies as an acceptable one under the Act. To clarify, he says, the office, no, I'm sorry, that's the quote from the Ethics Commissioner. But he went on in a different interview, this is Steve McKinnon, the government House Leader, and it said as follows. I think Canadians don't want to deny the Prime Minister the ability to take a Christmas vacation with his family, and that's what he did. McKinnon told reporters last week, all of the rules have been followed, and the law has, as one of its fundamental pillars, transparency, which is, of course, the reason why we're discussing this today. The Prime Minister has acted transparently. Are we to accept the House Leader's word for that? I think that would be negligent. I don't think we'd be doing our job as His Majesty's loyal opposition to accept that at face value in light of the fact that the office has since rebutted the position taken by the Prime Minister and his office that this was pre-approved. There's a lot of smoke here, Mr. Chair, and I'm sure there is a fire that's burning, Mr. Chair, that we need to find out its source. As I indicated, this is not a one-off. It is a series of missteps by this government. I talked about the Aga Khan vacation. We then had the dress-up clown show in India. We then had the issue surrounding the very first Truth and Reconciliation Day. Again, one of the hallmarks of the Trudeau brand and our Prime Minister in the 2015 election was his pronouncement that there was no other relationship that was more important to Canada than its relationship with Indigenous Canadians. He created the very first Truth and Reconciliation Day after the discovery of the unmarked graves in Kamloops. This was an important milestone in the history of this country in an effort to broker reconciliation between non-Indigenous and Indigenous alike. What did the Prime Minister do? The Prime Minister instructed his office to lie to Canadians to say that he was in Canada engaging in private meetings, when in fact some sleuths in the Canadian public were able to track his flight and realize he wasn't in Ottawa. He was en route to BC to take a surfing vacation.
Point of order, Chair.
Does anybody that's watching have any issues with the case that Larry Brock made, the questions he asked, the things he said? I highly doubt it. The Liberals do. they send in this old bag of wind, Pandamoff, to make a point of order. It's preposterous and weak. It's a bad look for the Liberals, so we want to show Canadians.
Ms. Damoff, on your point of order, and as it relates to the standing orders, I'd like to just some clarification on that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, twice now the member has said that the Prime Minister lied, and I think we all know that that is not allowed under parliamentary rules. So I just wondered if you could remind him that he can't say that the Prime Minister lied. If that could just, you could remind the honourable member of that, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Damoff. I'm going to ask Mr. Brock just to be a little more judicious in his words. Thank you.
So is that the deal? Trudeau's allowed to tell a lie, but we can't call it that because you're not supposed to call an MP a liar, even if they have a history of telling big, bad, black lies. To Canadians.
Honourable member for Battle River Crowfoot.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday Liberal-appointed senators voted to gut common sense Conservative Bill C-234, an action that betrays farmers. For the last decade, this PM has repeatedly made the claim that the Senate and those he appoints to it are independent, yet this weekend proved otherwise. He and his Socialist Environment Minister were busy employing a campaign of bullying and pressure to force his senators to kill this needed carbon tax carve-out. The carbon tax is punishing the farmers who produce the food and the folks that need it. Will this Prime Minister finally just listen to Canadians and axe his carbon tax?
It's a rare occasion, but Trudeau was in the House today, and the question was for Trudeau. Kirk was asking him, but that's not who answers. Check out who does.
Minister of Agriculture.
Mr. Speaker, I think my honourable colleague is well aware the other place makes the decisions on their own. We do not. The Conservative Party of Canada has senators in their caucus. The Conservative Party of Canada does not have a policy or a plan for the environment. But I can assure my honourable colleague that we do have a plan for the environment, and that's why we're able to make an investment of $1.5 billion to help farmers, processors reduce their environmental footprint. Mr. Speaker, we have and will continue to support our farmers and ranchers in this country.
I just want to say, I mean, as I said, the Honourable Minister sits right here. I can barely hear him. So let's try to keep the sound down.
Lawrence McCauley is 77 years old. The question Kirk was asking was for Trudeau. He's pissed that Trudeau wouldn't answer the question. He's going to lose control. You got to see this.
The Honourable Member for Battle River Crowfoot.
Mr. Speaker, I know for a fact that farmers are asking that minister to axe the carbon tax. That PM promised that the Senate would be independent, but the actions this past week prove that that is a complete farce. We know he bullied his senators. The PM himself was on the phone over the weekend telling them they had to gut Bill C-234. The Prime Minister lied, and his minions continue to lie about
Greg Fergus is away, so substitute House Speaker Chris D'Entremont has a real situation on his hands to deal with. How do you think it's going to go?
The honourable member who got here at the same time I did knows full well that you can't use that word. I would say the honourable member should retract that and apologize. The honourable member of Battle River Crowfoot.
Mr. Speaker, I will not apologize to that Prime Minister when he continues to lie about the independence of the Senate.
I'm asking the honourable member to apologize for the second time and retract that word. The honourable member knows full well you cannot use that word in this chamber.
Now, Damien Kirk's being given a second chance to apologize. Do you think he will?
So this is the last opportunity. The honourable member of Battle River Crowfoot, will you be retracting that?
It's the truth. It's the truth. I will not apologize to the Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Couric, would you mind leaving us today?
So what in the hell is going on, guys? How do we get out from underneath this rock that is the Trudeau Liberal government and cabinet? It's a disaster. WEF, they're just ruining our nation, tearing our people apart, dividing, distracting. It's hard to watch, guys, but we have to watch it. We have to get the word out. Yeah, so that pretty much is going to wrap up this video. I just want Canadians to see it. I know they can judge for themselves if they see it, that these Liberals are liars and they're deceiving Canadians all the time, distracting, dividing, messing with our heads, messing with our money, messing with our futures, and putting it on the back of climate change? What the hell? Doesn't make any sense. My name's Ehren. This is Question Period Canada, and we'll be bringing all the information that we can possibly find to show you how the Liberals are a bunch of... I think we're going, so we're gonna... a little... Hey friends, what's up? Ehren here, Question Period Canada. How are you today? Couple of questions for you before we get going. Were you aware that Greg Fergus, the new Speaker of the House, has become the most disruptive member of Parliament? He interrupts the flow of question period, stops the politicians, interrupts the politicians, delays the process. It's a disaster. We've got a great example of that coming up. Before we get into the example, I've got one more question, maybe two. Two questions in one. Do you know who Kevin Lamoureux is? He's a Liberal MP from Manitoba, and James Bazan, he's another MP, but he's a Conservative, also from Manitoba. They're going to have a battle here, and it is kind of fun to watch. It's the way the politicians should sort of be spatting or arguing. It's great. Here, check it out.
The Honourable Member from Selkirk Interlake Eastman.
Mr. Speaker, every day the member from Winnipeg North gets up into this place and talks and talks and talks and says absolutely nothing. Says absolutely nothing. Well, Mr. Speaker, every day the member from North Winnipeg gets up here and all he does is talk, talk, and talk. Only the Liberals like it because he says absolutely nothing. Now, according to the Rural Affairs Minister, the member from Winnipeg North failed to stand up and fight for Manitobans. Because of him, Manitobans have been left out in the cold. They can't afford to heat and eat after 8 miserable years of this Prime Minister and his punitive carbon tax. Manitobans at this useless Liberal MPs are not worth the cost. Will the Prime Minister allow the member for
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. The member wants to hear more from me. I'm happy to. At the end of the day, I want to remind members across the way an issue with the Conservative Party. Remember, I always say they're like a fish on a dock, flip-flopping all over the place, Mr. Speaker. That applies on the carbon price too. I'll tell you what the leader of the Conservative Party doesn't tell Canadians. He's going to take away the rebate, Mr. Speaker. That's going to take out of the pockets 80% of the constituents of Winnipeg North, the people I represent, money out of their pocket. Shame on the leader for the official opposition for being so reckless and risky, Mr. Speaker.
Would you agree that's how politicians should be behaving? Arguing very strongly back and forth, insulting each other, making jokes, being funny, bringing some flair to the floor of Parliament? That's the way I think it should be. Not Greg Fergus, though. You can see earlier that James Bazan was interrupted by the House Speaker, and it is so much worse when you see the clip uncut. We're going to take a peek at that now. This Greg Fergus guy is strange. Introducing this type of decorum that doesn't belong on the Parliament floor? Let's take a look. It is painful to watch. There's a lot of silence and it's awkward. But you have to see the influence that the House Speaker is trying to make and how disruptive he is to the flow of question period.
Once again, I'd like to encourage all members, colleagues, all members to please hold your comments back to the time that you have the floor to ask a question or to give an answer. That way we can hear everything that's going on from all ends of the House. The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, every day the member from Winnipeg North gets up into this place and talks and talks and talks and says absolutely nothing. Says absolutely nothing.
Strange enough, what had just happened when Bazan mentions, without saying his name, Lamoureux, the Liberals started giving Lamoureux applause. But Greg can't have the politicians having any fun, so he interrupts the politicians until the Liberals calm down. Won't let Bazan speak. Finally, he does. This is pretty painful. Goes on a long time.
Again, before I return to colleagues.
Nobody listens.
Before I return to the member from Selkirk, Interlake, Eastman, I'm going to ask all colleagues once again to please, when you have the floor, use it. When you don't have the floor, listen to the person who does. The honourable member from 25. Honourable member, excuse me.
He won't let it go.
Excuse me.
Let it go, silly man. Sit down and shut up.
I know the honourable member is anxious. I'd like to give the honourable member the opportunity to start his question from the top, please.
You can't keep any of them under control.
Well, Mr. Speaker, every day the member from North Winnipeg gets up here and all he does is talk, talk, and talk. Only the Liberals like it because he says absolutely nothing. Now, according to the Rural Affairs Minister, the member from Winnipeg North failed to stand up and fight for Manitobans. Because of him, Manitobans have been left out in the cold. They can't afford to heat and eat after 8 miserable years of this Prime Minister and his punitive carbon tax. Manitobans at this useless Liberal MPs are not worth the cost. Will the Prime Minister allow the member...
And then he cuts him off. He cut him off. For what reason? Just cuts him off, and then there's another delay. Does this stand?
I would have liked to have heard the honourable member's end of question. Unfortunately, the honourable member's time had expired, and then some. This is a reason why it's important for both sides of the House to please allow the member to ask a question without interrupting, so that we can hear the question and the member can profit from the full time that the member would be entitled to. Is the Honourable
Makes no sense.
Yes,
Secretary.
thank you, Mr. Speaker. The member wants to hear more from me. I'm happy.
Lamoureux's pretty funny too.
Remind members across the way, an issue with the Conservative Party. Remember, I always say they're like a fish on a dock, flip-flopping all over the place, Mr. Speaker? That applies on the carbon price, too. I'll tell you what the leader of the Conservative Party doesn't tell Canadians. He's going to take away the rebate, Mr. Speaker. That's going to take out of the pockets 80% of the constituents of Winnipeg North, the people I represent, money out of their pocket. Shame on the leader for the official opposition for being so reckless and risky, Mr. Speaker.
But Fergus can't handle it. Can't have any of that fun. No fun for these guys. Look at him. Weird. He hits this button. Turns them right off. He can't even hear anything. He does this all the time in question period. It's absolutely brutal. Look at how long this is going on. Dead silence. We watch this every day, guys. I'll tell you, Greg Fergus is on my nerves. Imagine the politicians. How long is this going to go on?
The honourable member from Calgary Skyview.
Okay, I just wanted to show you how much of an issue Greg Fergus has become. He does this daily. Fergus, like every second question, he interrupts, talking about manners and decorum and respect. They're MPs. They're a different breed of animal. They make their own rules, I think, and Greg is trying to make his own set of rules for the MPs, and no side is taking to it. Both sides dislike him. It's terribly frustrating. To send you off, we're going to go out on a clip that shows you how bad it's gotten. Somebody actually tells Greg to sit down and shut up. That's how frustrated the politicians are. It's lots of fun. Anyways, we'll send you out on that. Before we do, my name's Ehren. This is Question Period Canada. We're having fun with Canadian politics here, having a really good time, learning a lot too. So like and subscribe. We'll be bringing you lots of fun content. We'll check you out in the next video. Watch this clip. It's pretty good. Sit down and shut up, Mr. Speaker.
It is so
awkward
important.
And funny. He puts his hands down.
Order.
Sit down and shut
it
up.
is important,
It's
once
hysterical.
again,
So
to
weird.
not call in.
Sit down, speaker is up.
He just
Can I
keeps
ask the
going.
member, please, from Surrey, to please, Surrey Newton, to please allow me to
That link
continue.
won't work in this decorum.
Colleagues, I ask all members to please exercise discretion. These are the things which you all raised with me and others in terms of improving the discretion. So I'm going to ask the Honourable Leader of the colleagues.
It's weird, guys.
Colleagues. May I ask all colleagues, excuse me, colleagues.
Weird.
Colleagues, temperatures are running hot. Temperatures are running hot today. If I could ask all members, please, to sit down. May I ask all members to respectfully sit down, please?
All members.
May I ask all members to respectfully sit down until I recognize them to speak? Please.
So weird. Just hand gestures. Oh, man.
Colleagues.
Come on.
Colleagues.
Come on. He's going to have to give in, right? He will.
Colleagues.
I hope. Come on, sit down.
The honourable member of the honourable leader of the opposition.
So finally, Greg Fergus, the new House Speaker, did sit down and shut up. It doesn't last very long, but it happened that time. Like and subscribe. We're having fun with Canadian politics as we learn. That's it. We'll catch you next video. Hope you like this one. Yeah, I think we're going. And now I don't know if I should do it, but I'm gonna put one more and just gonna run it for an hour. I've been running some of these old episodes. Today's show has been super interesting. That was a heated OGO investigation. OGO committee is super interesting. I've got to start figuring out actually to time those so that they aren't like a little bit delayed, that they're actually live on schedule. We're working on that, guys. Like, much love to the chat room. I see some familiar faces, which are great to see and hear, especially with the quality of the people that we have. People are allowed to argue. Obviously, people are allowed to debate. We try to keep the language pretty clean because some people don't like that stuff in a couple of words. Just be creative with your words, guys, and don't go at any particular person too hard. We're here to criticize politicians, not each other. And if one of us is a bit off rail, it's probably because they were misled by politicians. So it's not a personal thing. Want to say thank you to everybody that watched today. It's so much fun. I've got this other video that's running hot. We should actually, maybe I'm going to post that now. Because I've got one more link for you to check out. And it's going to be this one. I've got this video and it's done 5,000 views in like 3 hours. So for me, that's a really good number. And yeah, so we're putting that up in the chat right there. Boom. We're wrapping it up. We're out. Thank you all again so much for watching. We'll be back tomorrow with something more interesting. They said they're going to bring that investigation back tomorrow. So we'll be here earlier. We normally do in my time zone, it's 3 p.m., but that's 3 p.m. AST. So if it's 2 p.m. in your time zone, or if you're in Alberta, it's, I guess, noon and 11 if you're in British Columbia. But I think tomorrow we're going to be starting an hour earlier because the investigation's going to be starting an hour earlier. That's, again, we're just trying to mix it up, try to keep it fresh. I adore this chat room, everybody. Like, because everybody's so well behaved. It's like, that's how I want Canada to be. Like, the way that my chat room, or the way that this chat room is, that there's arguments and then other people, whatever. Again, we have one interesting, very interesting to me personality that stands out in the room, and I'd love to talk to that person because I think they're mostly with us. They're part of the gang, guys. That's how it is. Like, we can't all see eye to eye exactly. So that's it. We're going to wrap up. I'm Ehren, Question Period Canada. We're learning about Canadian politics here. That's my personal quest, is to learn as much as any Canadian can about like what is going on in the moment to moment. And while I'm on that adventure, I'm going to be sharing the things I learned with you that I can figure out how to post and doing live broadcasts. That's it. My cat wants to say hello. Hi, baby. Hi. Oh no, she doesn't really want to say hello. She's doing anything she can to get away. She's gonna scratch me pretty bad, probably, because she's gonna fall. Yeah, go down. We're done. Thank you all for watching. We're out. You guys are the best. It's good to see some people back in the room I haven't seen in a while. That's really nice. Our room is getting better, guys. The whole thing is. The politics are getting worse, but the productions are getting better. Anyways, thank you all. There was a lot of generosity on the channel today. That does not elude me. That's not. We do not come here to beg for gifts or anything like that. We beg for you to return. That's all. All right. We're out. Thank you all for watching. Have something healthy to eat. Try to stay warm. It was a sunny day here in Nova Scotia. Besides the hail and the rain, there was some sun. We're out. Take care, guys. It's awesome.